Friends, fans, and fine folk, grab your drinks and snacks and come on down to join us for this short rest. With no other than Felix Irnich from Fool's Gold fame. Felix, say hey so I can make sure that I've definitely done sound checks right, like a professional streamer.
Absolutely. Hi, how's it going? Lovely to be here.
Awesome. You are definitely working. You may be a little loud, so I'll turn you down a little. There we go. And then people can tell me if you're... How's the levels, everybody? Petiola, thank you very much for subscribing at Tier 1 for 4 months. And everybody else who's kicked off this hype train. Are you all hyped?
Oh, already
to
a hype
us?
train.
Yeah, hype train already. So are you all hyped to join us around this campfire, everybody? Thank you, Myth.
I'm definitely excited to be here.
It is wonderful to have you here, Felix. I thoroughly enjoyed our game the other day. Oh, look at that! Just out of habit, guys, I just poured myself a drink of water without making you all suffer for it. My usual troll technique is to pour it directly in front of the microphone to try and make people go to the bathroom. But I forgot today. Because thank you for subscribing at Tier 1. So, we should probably explain who you are in case people don't know, Felix.
Sure.
Would you like to do the honors, or would you like to make me struggle through an introduction?
That's a tempting offer, but I'll help you out this one time. I mean, yeah. For those who don't know me, my name is Felix Irnich. I'm the DM of the original Fool's Gold D&D campaign. My partner Dingo is the one making all the animations. I'm getting a phone call midstream. Apologize.
Totally all right, we're gonna end it there, guys, because I just can't get the guests. Just people taking phone calls.
Yeah, excuse me. What else do? I do a little bit of video game streaming, just super casually on Twitch at Final Boss Felix there, and otherwise you can find me on Twitter, Felix Irnich. What else do? I own a distillery, not in Australia, unfortunately, but if you're in Canada and the States, you can have some of my liquor. If you check out T-Rex Distillery.
That's new. That's news to me. You own a distillery.
Yeah, I do. Actually, I'm like the most adult child because I own an ice cream factory. I own a distillery.
What?
I own a D&D company, with Dingo, right? We're making this. And my next venture is video game development. So never grow up.
Okay. This has immediately derailed my thoughts of where this was going to go, because I need to know the details of how you own an ice cream factory.
Oh, geez, I don't know if there's I mean, it's not too crazy of a story, but it's just I mean, okay, I'm originally from Germany. I immigrated to Canada when was that? That was about 2008, I think. 2008? Yeah, it was 2008, 2007 that I immigrated from Germany to Canada. And, years go by and whatnot. But in Germany, there's a huge amount of really delicious gelato because, we're right beside Italy, and all the Italians came over and opened all these amazing gelato shops. And my mom actually learned that in her youth. And we were my family had a construction company and they were getting sick and tired of it. And I was in Germany with Dingo at the time. And I was just like, hey, once we came back, I was like, hey, why don't we make good gelato? There's no good gelato in Canada, which there really isn't until I made it. And that's the story. That's how we did it. We just said, wouldn't this be nice?
Started making gelato, and then
yeah, exactly.
And then obviously from there you went into distilling liquor, and because that's not normal. You were like, we should make this gelato taste like bourbon, and then
You're spot on. You're literally spot on, because so what happened when I made the gelato company is within the first year it grew really crazy because people love good gelato apparently, and we had national distribution and all that stuff. But right away when that happened, we were like, you know what? We should make liquor ice cream. That should be our next venture.
Right.
And for 3 years,
liquor taste or alcoholic ice cream.
No, not taste, because that already exists. I think Haagen-Dazs does a bit of that, but this is 5% ABV.
Right.
This is in there.
Ice cream.
This is ice cream that gets you drunk. Yeah, exactly. So that took us
you don't want to mix that up at a kid's birthday party.
God,
time for jelly and ice cream, and all the kids are like,
yay!
It'll make pin the tail on the donkey a lot harder though.
Oh, they're gonna sleep well that night. But yeah, it was like 3 years of arguing with the government about why I should be allowed to make it because it was going against a bunch of regulations that they weren't happy with. But like 3 years later, they were on board, and then I made liquor gelato.
Wow.
And but the thing is, as part of that deal, they were like, okay, you can make liquor gelato, but you need to distill your own spirits. You can't just go buy wine and mix it in. You gotta make your own. And we're like, we love that. We want to do that anyways. So then, because of that, we had to get a distilling license. And it's like, sure, we did that. Made our liquor gelato, which is loved by many, but just in like my home province. And
which province?
Alberta. I don't live there anymore right now, but at the time it was Alberta, Canada. Yes, where you can buy the liquor gelato.
Whereabouts in Alberta? I've been there. Like
so I was from the Edmonton area.
Oh yeah. My fiance and I were there for. My brother got married in Banff. In 2012. So we were there for a holiday, and then my other brother was getting married in England like 6 months later, and we were like, we're not going to fly all the way back to. All the way to Banff and then back to New Zealand and then all the way to England like with 6 months. We'd just stay out and travel. This is going to be our year of traveling. So we stayed in. Everybody else left Banff. We went to Calgary, then to Edmonton, and then back to Calgary to get a Greyhound over to Vancouver, and then we zigzagged through the States, made our way over to New York, and flew out from there.
Nice.
So it was nice.
But driving in Alberta is dreadful, though.
It was
just straight flat lines.
So it was the first time I'd ever driven on the wrong side of the road, and it was in the middle. It was like February, so it was cold and snowing, and I had to drive a rental car on the wrong side of the road to all the way from Calgary to Edmonton in the middle of a snowstorm, and I was like,
"Oh my god." That's like the full Alberta experience. Holy shit.
I was like, well, this is where we die.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Weirdly, we had to drive like super close to the car in front. You'd think like, oh, you got to put extra distance, but like I tried to put like stopping distance, and then the snow was coming in so heavy that I literally you wouldn't be able to see the road if you were like. Because the snow would cover up the tracks immediately if the cab. So everybody was driving super slow but super close, so that you can actually see where the road is.
yeah, it's a crazy time. By the way, there's a lot of people in chat saying you're really quiet.
Yeah, I've just noticed that myself. So I'm gonna nip into my sound settings. I never have sound setting issues on my stream ever.
Ever? No.
No, this is definitely not a common occurrence at all.
Right. So it's my fault then, I guess.
It must be. It must be the only thing that's changed. The only thing that's changed, except for the levels on my microphone, which have somehow turned themselves down to 59%, even though the other day I explicitly turned them up to 90% because I had the same issue, and then I haven't touched them. Haven't touched them since, and now there we go. All right, this is back up to the normal. Yeah, I can turn you down a little, turn myself down a little, turn you back up a little. There we go. We're more even now.
Perfect.
Fixed.
Hopefully that's better, guys.
All right.
Yeah. Where were we?
I'll just when I put this on YouTube, I'll just cut it here. All right. Welcome everybody. Rob definitely did all of his sound checks beforehand to make sure that he was sounding fine because he's a total professional streamer. So so in your hometown, home province of Alberta, you have your distillery and a gelato place. It's not a chain. You haven't expanded out to have them in different areas.
No, because it's a factory. So that gelato is actually sold to restaurants and retail stores all across Canada. Wow. So it's not a restaurant chain.
Right.
Yeah. And that reminds me what I was going to say. So because we had to make our own liquor, we had the distillery equipment. Yeah. And eventually we were like, well, why don't we try making vodka? We're part of this. We have a distillery, like let's go make some vodka.
So what were you distilling for the gelato? What flavors? What alcohol was it?
So there's 4 flavors we started with. We've developed a lot more, but those are all the ones we were able to release. Which is it's a peach Chardonnay. That's actually sorbet or sherbet, depending on where you're from. Right. We got a chocolate orange brandy.
Ooh.
We've got a apple pie moonshine, and we've got a red wine cream.
Wow. Yeah. Incredible.
I'm sorry, people screaming in chat. Unfortunately, you can't buy it outside of Alberta. It's only there.
Gotta go to Alberta, everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, you should go to Alberta anyway, especially if you like skiing in any way. I absolutely highly recommend Banff. It is one of the most beautiful places on earth.
Definitely go to Banff.
So,
Jasper's nice too.
So if I went to Canada, any particular province, and went to a restaurant, there's a chance I'd see your gelato on the restaurant. That's amazing. That is absolutely incredible. And so then you went, okay, let's distill actual just direct alcohol so that people don't have to have alcoholic gelato to get pissed. And you went into vodka.
Yeah, we went to vodka first because that's the easiest spirit. You know, vodka, you just distill it, you filter it, you blend it, boom, you got vodka. It's done. We did also start some other stuff like making rum and, you know, like rye whiskeys and those sorts of things, but they legally have to age. So there's a mandatory amount of time. You have to leave it aging in a barrel. Otherwise, you cannot sell it, or like you can't call it rum or whiskey at that point.
Right.
So we started that up as well, but we were just kind of trying it out because there was an emerging like small distiller group in Alberta, and we were just kind of joining that in, and we had a lot of success. Actually, now the gelato side of things is like this itty bitty portion of my business. And it's like 95% distillery because we've actually become I think we're the fourth largest distillery in Alberta.
What?
By volume, pretty sure. Yeah, it's the fourth one.
That's incredible, man. So
thank you.
What's the minimum length of time that you have to age them for then? How long did you have to be like, all right, we're going to start this thing, but it's not going to pay off until
Yeah. So the rum has to be at least aged for 1 year.
Right.
And whiskey has to be at least aged 3 years. But that's just in Canada. That's not the States. It's just Canadian law.
Canadian laws. And obviously if you were to try and take it outside of Alberta, you'd come across different laws, different rules, all that sort of thing. You'd have to change. You'd have to, because you were saying you can't get it outside of Alberta, right?
Yeah, you can't get the ice cream outside of Alberta because of very archaic liquor laws,
right?
Which I cannot get around. I changed some laws in Alberta to make it happen in the first place. I'm not going to change laws elsewhere.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
man, that's absolutely incredible. What did we get the name of it yet? The name of your gelato or the name of your distillery?
Yeah, so it's called T-Rex Distillery, and at the moment it's mainly available in Alberta and other Canadian provinces where you can order it online. And if you live in California, it'll be there very soon. That's currently what I'm working on.
T-Rex.
We got all the approvals for some good old exports to the States. Now it just takes a bit of time to get it all set up.
Excellent.
But coming soon.
that's amazing. So you got into all of this, and what sort of timeline are we talking about? This was 5 years ago, 20 years ago? 2015. 2015.
Yeah.
So relatively recently in the grand scheme of things. So then you started playing D&D after all of this, or you were playing D&D your whole life and then you decided to follow that as well?
No, D&D I've played since about 2009, 2010.
Right. So you were playing D&D while you were doing all this other stuff, but only ever like as a hobby and a pastime.
Yeah, exactly. So for most of my time in D&D, I was actually just a player, just playing in other people's games. Yeah. And I had actually Gorthan's player. He was the DM that got me into DMing in the first place.
Right.
And so what was it about? Yeah, it was around the time of Fool's Gold when I first got into DMing. So that was maybe 2014, I want to say, that I actually... No, it was a bit earlier. Maybe like 2012 would be the time when I actually got into DMing, around there. And had a first campaign, was awful. Had a second campaign, was a lot better. Not to blame my players. I'm blaming myself for not doing that well.
Was it all with the same players or vastly the same?
It was the same players.
It was.
The first campaign, like it started with just 2 of them, but then it grew over time to like more players. Like eventually, like who did I start with? I think I just started with Julian and Gorthan's players, I want to say the next one to join was probably Dingo, then by Irina's player, and then finally Gothy's player joined.
So you're sorry, go on.
No, you go on.
The first campaign you said was not great. Was that like a 1 to 20 and you just kind of breezed through it, or did you only go like 1 to level 7 and then were like, this is not good, let's start again?
Yeah. It was like maybe 3-4 levels or
right.
so. Like I hadn't really gotten the hang of proper planning or improv yet, so it was kind of just a mess of just like and then this happens and there's the bad guy. It's just like if I look back at it now, I'd probably cringe. But it probably wasn't that bad.
Now, did you take the same setting and move it into a second campaign, or did you just start again, new world, new monsters, new gods, everything?
Scrapped everything entirely.
Yeah. Now,
what I had back then was like a setting of just like it wasn't really fleshed out at all. It was just a super rough idea.
That's something that I genuinely recommend when people ask me about tips for DMing and things. That's one of the things that I say is an invaluable piece of advice, is to deliberately do that. Deliberately plan to have a scrapped campaign first of like 3 levels or something. And just because I have learned so many things from my home games that I hate about my world because I haven't been able to scrap it because I didn't realize that it was going to be important, like working out distances between places that now I have to retroactively come up with, like, why did I say that this was like 2 days apart when, Jesus, the actual size of the world is... everything's changed, and then the gods. Why would I not have put this many gods in that one? And why there's like magic numbers and things of. There's just so much about my world planning that if I'd had that trial run of been like, I'll just create something, play with it, learn these things, and then scrap it and start again with this new, like from the ground up, with this new knowledge of what is important to me as a world builder, then I'd be
that's
much
super
better.
Valuable.
Yeah, and so it's probably for the best that you had that. You were just kind of coming up with shit and then just went, oh, I don't like any of this, scrap it, start again.
Totally. So, yeah, and I mean there was fun parts of it. I'm not trying to say the campaign was miserable. Like there was like, oh yeah, this is really fun. Oh, that didn't really work, and oh, my bad guy died in 1 turn.
Absolutely. And, so you take
my players are confused and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you take the good bits, you keep those for your new campaign, and you start over. So your Fool's Gold setting, the Into the Bellowing Wilds, the setting of that world, that came about for the campaign that we see on Dingo Doodles.
Yep, campaign number 2. That's the second one I ever did.
2. Wow.
And that turned into this whole the whole Fool's Gold thing.
Yeah. So you have in that campaign you have a lot of homebrewed stuff, like huge amounts of homebrewed stuff, homebrewed spell lists, homebrewed magic surges, homebrewed monsters galore. And so what made you decide, I can balance these things, I can come up with new stuff that isn't published content, like not just in the campaign setting but all of it, monsters and spells and everything, and curses and things. I don't know, it's hard to say. Like I just can't do it. I really enjoy it, and I often got inspiration from games that I've played. You can see some influence for sure from like Witcher, Dark Souls, Zelda, those kinds of games. Of just like, wow, wouldn't it be cool to do something like this? And I think about maybe a way to do something similar in D&D, and that's just how I go about it. If I think something's fun, I add it. Like in a kind of Fool's Gold offshoot campaign I did, something that won't be published, I started throwing in magic of like, these are level 10, 11, and 12 spells. They've been forbidden by the gods, and here you get to use one of them. Go have fun, right? Wow.
That's really all there is to it. But the nice thing is I can trust my players. Like I gave them a fucking mech dragon, right? Like they know they could take this dragon and they could level the jungle if they felt like it. Yeah. Now, I had a background, like not a backup. I had a backup plan for that, which is it eventually came to be, which is if you overuse the dragon, well, then the soul crystal runs out of energy and it just feeds itself whether you like it or not. So that's kind of the balance to that. But I just enjoy homebrew a lot more than I enjoy the pre-made stuff. I used to read a lot of D&D books, like, I mean, I read the staples, of course, your Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, the Beastie. I love the monster manuals. I read through those all the time. Same with like the Draconomicons. Love those books. But I enjoy making the lore myself just more.
Yeah.
Like, I never run modules. To this day, I've never run a module because that's not the fun for me.
Yeah,
not to say they're bad. It's just
we're on the same page there. Like my first campaign was one I created for myself, and partly the reason for it was that there's so much lore to D&D. There's so much in the Forgotten Realms. If I was to try and set my game in a world that existed, in a setting that existed, I would feel overwhelmed by my players inevitably knowing more about that world than I did, because I'd be like, I guess you pray to the god of thievery, and then I'd be looking it up, and somebody'd be like, oh, that's so-and-so in this setting, but ever since the Spelljammer or the Spell Plague something or other blah-de-blah happening of so-and-so year, it's actually been so-and-so, but there's and I'd be like, who is, what, why do you know? And so I was like, they can't know more about the world than I do if I come up with everything. And so I was like, nah, I control the setting. Yeah, I control the setting, I control the gods. You want to know any information or lore about this world, you have to ask me, because it's not written anywhere. Yeah. And I just find it more interesting that I don't have to stick to certain existing lore about anything, any monsters or whatever. Like, goblins aren't necessarily evil in my world. Orcs aren't necessarily evil. You know, they just tend towards evil, things like that. The only things that are inherently evil in my world are things from the lower planes of existence, the actual evil planes. Because if they weren't evil, they would no longer be a demon. They would be something else. So there's those sorts of rules I can come up with because I'm in charge. So I feel more comfortable that way. The only times that I've run modules is for a while I was a DM for children on like a Sunday, and it was like a teaching kind of experience to help some difficult children with learning social cues and stuff, learning to work together and things like that. And that was quite fun, and we ran one of the starter modules, and I was introduced to how shitty the modules can be.
Oh no!
I was like, the module I ran was the Dragon of Ice Spire Peak, which is in the Essentials kit, and it just felt like a video game to me rather than an RPG. Like they got to choose from 3 quests, and regardless of which one they chose, this thing happens. And then they can, if they want more experience or gold, they can then go back and do one of the other 2 quests. And then if they do that, they get this much gold or whatever. And if they go and do the other one, then and every time, like, one of the 3 starting quests is go and warn these 2 dwarves that there's a dragon in the area, because they're out at this site excavating some old dwarven ruins and they don't know yet. So you need to go and warn them. And then when you get there, there's some monsters in the ruins that you have to help them fight. And my players didn't go and do that one. They chose to do this other thing instead. And then they chose to do this other thing. And then another side quest opened up and they chose to do that. And then eventually, when they wanted the experience, they went, oh, let's go back and do that first starter side quest and go and warn those dwarves. And when they got there, the dwarves were dead. They'd been eaten by a dragon because they hadn't gone and warned them. And so, like, in my world, that's how that works. But in the campaign, no, they just turn up and when they arrive here, the dwarves are blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, that's a video game, where the side quest doesn't matter when you take it or how long you take to do it. If you are given a side quest, go and tell this guy real quick, or take this urgent note to somebody, and you don't do it urgently, in my game, that's going to be a problem. The world keeps moving with or without you.
That's the key. The world keeps moving. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I had that too. Like, we finished up a campaign, and it's like, you guys never went to this area. And eventually they go explore, and it's like, yeah, everybody's dead. The place is destroyed. The lore has been burned. You're too late.
The number of times I've done it. I love that it's sort of self-balancing as well, because if I've sort of prepared for them to potentially do this other thing over here, and they're level 3, and I've created a bad guy who's about level 3 challenge. If they don't go and deal with his evil plot right now, and they instead go up to level 7 doing this other entire thing over here, this guy's also leveling up at the same time, so he stays relevant. So they can go back and deal with him later, and he'll be of the same sort of challenge rating. And it's one thing I loved about the Fool's Gold, the Dingo Doodles thing of the idea of the poison potato hole thing. I don't want to give away too many spoilers in case people in my community haven't seen it yet. If you haven't seen Dingo Doodles, by the way, guys, one of my mods will put a link to it in the chat, I'm sure. But Dingo Doodles is a YouTube channel. Felix's partner Dingo is in Felix's game and animates certain stories of the game. It's a different way of seeing sort of a let's play through D&D. Normally you see people sitting at the table actually playing it. It becomes quite intimidating to get into a new campaign that you've not got any idea about. But with Dingo Doodles, instead of seeing them playing, you're seeing anecdotes from the game after the fact, and Dingo animates them really well and narrates them fantastically well as well. She's a really good voice actress.
She's become really good. Yeah, it's basically like the animated Netflix special of Fool's Gold.
Yes, and it's fantastic, really compelling story. And I don't want to give away any details of it, but yeah, the poison potato thing of like, if they'd have dealt with it at this level, you know, the antagonist, shall we say, was only going to be this sort of power, but because they went and did this other thing, and this was happening in the background, and then eventually they come together, and it's more of a clash.
Yeah, though I gotta say that the poison potato, that was a bit different because it didn't give them an opportunity to deal with it. More just like, I'm writing this down, that you just did this, and I'm gonna keep this in my pocket.
I will remember that you did this.
A literal like year in real life is gonna pass before I pull this note back out, and we're gonna deal with some consequences. So
many consequences. It's probably one of my favorite word of D&D, consequences, because it's so good to remind the players of something that they did way back when. One of my favorite arcs of one of my home games was early on, the warlock, who's kind of a criminal background, he went off to rob a magic store, and he did so, and he got away with it. And then they carried on with their life, and they didn't know that the owner of the magic store had hired an ex-rogue assassin dude to a bounty hunter, essentially, to track them down and get his stuff back. And so eventually, like, probably close to a year later in game, in real world, I had been the entire time tracking their movements and how long they were staying in any one particular place and what sort of clues they were leaving, who were they talking to while they were there that could describe them when this bounty hunter comes in, all this. And eventually he catches up to a place where they're staying for like a week of downtime. It was the first time that they'd actually stayed in one place and gone, oh, let's just spend some downtime here. And when they did so, that gave him the chance to finally catch up. He found them, disguised himself, and like befriended them a little bit. And then at one point he persuaded them to split the party and was like, "Oh, me and you, Mal, we'll go and get the horses while you guys go and do the thing." And when he walked into the stable, I was like, oh, "Okay, so you're looking at the horses deciding which to attack, and then a garrote around your neck, and suddenly and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna cast this," and I was like, "Was there a verbal component?" "Yeah." "Well, you've got a garrote in your throat. You can't cast a verbal component." "Oh God!" he has got a terrible constitution, so he had one round to find some way of getting out of it before he passed out. Oh. And then the next time, and then he woke up and it was bound and gagged on the back of a horse, and this bounty hunter was taking him back to the magic owner to say like, "Nah, you've got consequences coming, mate." And it ended up, they thought they were going this direction, and then all of a sudden, bam, they're going this way.
Yeah. Yeah. When you have players that are into that, it's the best.
Yeah, and it does take your players being into it. That's a very good point. Like, some players don't like that you removing any sort of agency from them. Some players don't like you having consequences come back and bite them. It's like, well, that shouldn't. I should be allowed to, especially if they're more used to video games. So that's the sort of thing I like to make clear about my games. If I'm ever playing like a new game with new people, I try and make it clear. This is the sort of game that I run in a session 0 sort of thing. Like, this is the sort of game that I run. Your consequences will have actions. Your actions will have consequences.
Always make sure your players have their expectations in the right spot, that everybody knows what's up. That's like generic DM advice for everybody. Player expectations. Make sure you know about them and that they know about them.
Yeah, the audience of the VLDL stuff really enjoy that as well. So I run a game for Viva La Dirt League on YouTube, and and there's quite a few times that I've now brought back consequences of their actions. And people are always like, "Yay, they're fine. Maybe they'll learn this time," and they never do.
Oh no, the players never learn.
So let's change tact a little bit here and talk about this Fool's Gold Into the Belling Wilds Kickstarter, which is going absolutely tremendously well, it seems. I haven't checked it this morning, but last night it was at $930,000.
Yeah, probably gonna maybe even crack the million this week, which is just bonkers to me.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of money.
Yeah.
What's it feel like to be on that side of it? To be like, oh, something I'm created has gotten this much support and excitement.
You know what? The Kickstarter hasn't sunk in yet. I feel like it's not gonna sink in until I take a vacation later this year, and then I'm probably gonna be like in the vacation bed, just like, oh my fucking god.
You'll be going, oh yeah. So what have I got to do later? You'll be thinking forward planning and going, oh yeah, that's a big thing. That's a really big thing.
That's a thing. Yeah.
So the Kickstarter, I noticed it was like the original goal was like $10,000, which you must have known was ridiculously low, right? Did you genuinely think that was like, oh, maybe we'll get there, or were you like, oh, I'll put that as like a safe goal?
I didn't have doubt that we would get funded.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how many of the stretch goals we were able to actually conquer, because there's a lot of extra content we really wanted to make, especially Calandria, which is at the 1 million mark. And it's like, well, I really hope we reach this, because that would be so cool if I can actually add this to it. But in terms of that launch goal, the funding goal, we actually had a bet where Dingo thought it wouldn't get funded until she posted her episode a few days later.
Right.
And I was of the opinion that it would get funded. But we tried to just go in with no expectation, because if you overhype it, then you just get disappointed no matter what. But we went in with zero expectation, and then I just woke up the morning of an almost sleepless night and looked at it and just like, free dinner for me, thanks, honey. Because that was crazy to see. It's like funded in, I think my mom was saying, because my mom is in the Alberta time zone, so they get to, they see it, they wake up faster than I do, and she was watching it since the get-go, and she said 4 minutes is all it took. 4 minutes.
4 minute funded. So people, so with that level, that's like not people getting announced. That's not people getting alerts, because it takes that time to go in and click and choose your pledge and read through. Oh yeah, this one, and then actually go through all the process. That takes some time. So it's not people who are getting a notification or an alert and then going in and do it. That's people sitting at their computer waiting for it to go live, and which must feel amazing. That must feel like some sort of surreal weirdness there.
It does. It is surreal. It's like some of it is starting to sink in, and just seeing people being so excited. Like my Twitter just exploded, and Dingo's got absolutely nuked with people just saying like, "Oh, we're so excited! I ordered like the deluxe 4-claimer box," and it was just like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah.
And every few days, at least once or twice a week, I just think back like, this was just a couple of absolute idiots, me included, playing D&D in my basement, and now we're making this whole production of YouTube show and box sets, and it's like, how the hell did I get here?
Mate, not to that level, but I'm in the same sort of boat. As being able to say that I do Dungeons and Dragons for a living is so bizarre. Like I was just doing it. I started like 5 or 6 years ago, Dungeon Mastering, and came up with my world and just enjoyed myself. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. My background as an actor really helped with putting on the roles and thinking about the NPCs and things and what they want from life, all that sort of characterization stuff. And I didn't know that I was good at it. Well, I knew that, like, my friends really enjoyed it and they told me so, that they enjoyed the games, but I didn't know that I was anything more than any other Dungeon Master would be, until a mutual friend put me in touch with Vive la Dirt League and said, these guys, I think it'd be good for them to do D&D on their channel because it's related to the sort of World of Warcrafty kind of skits that they make, and you're pretty good at it, so put those in touch. We did a one shot, and it was super popular among the people it was popular with. Like, and lots of people were like, "Oh my god, you should!" And so I started being like, "Can I do this as a career somehow? Is that a thing that I could? Is that a thing I could do? Is that something that could pay the bills?" And then I discovered Twitch and Twitch streaming, and discovered that people are, for some reason, willing to turn up several times a week to listen to me chat about Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, okay, this is something I can do. What a weird place to be. If you'd have told me just a couple of years ago, oh, you're going to be doing Dungeons and Dragons for a living, while I was studying mathematics at university to try and get a quote-unquote real job because acting wasn't paying the bills. So I'd gone back to get a real job, and I ended up in Dungeons and Dragons. How much further from a real job can you be getting than talking
not
on
much
Twitch?
further.
It's bizarre. I also love to tell people who are completely nothing to do with the industry or gaming or anything, like just people who are doing like flat viewings to be a flatmate, or like people that you talk to at a dinner party of a mutual friend or something, and they're like, "What do you do?" And you're like, "I'm a dungeon master," and I just say that without any context to just see how they react and which kind of dungeon master they assume that I am.
Yeah, what kind of dungeon master is it?
I'm a dungeon master. I entertain adults for a living. I allow adults to act out their fantasies.
I allow adults to act out their fantasies, and I punish them every once in a while and bring on some pain and emotional distress.
But they enjoy it. They pay me to do so.
But they enjoy it, and they keep coming back for more.
It's bizarre.
And there's thousands of people watching.
So what you were hoping for in the Kickstarter? Where was your personal like stretch goal in your mind of like, if we can get this much, I'm happy?
Well, my personal was like $100,000.
Right.
Honestly, if it's like, if we just get, like, it was less about the money and more just about seeing, are people really interested in this? Like, am I just tooting my own horn, or are people genuinely interested in purchasing this stuff?
Because there's a big difference between like willing to watch a video on YouTube and wanting to pay good money that you've earned to a product so that you can then indulge in that same world yourself. Huge sort of gap there, and you never really know. Like, the videos are very successful and very popular. The comments are always very pleasing and positive, but does that equate to income? And turns out yes in a big way.
In a big way, yeah. But aside from that, I now I just keep looking forward to the next stretch goals. I'm kind of just at the other side of the table, but I am just as excited because, like I said, there's the $1 million for Kylandria, and there's the 1.5 million to actually do a
podcast,
another Fool's Gold podcast for a different world in the universe.
So let's talk about the stretch goals then. See if we can encourage people to get to them. So you're real close to the next one, $1 million. I kickstarted it myself yesterday. I got the box set and the STL files. I've got my. I kickstarted.
Thank you.
I kickstarted a 3D printer so that when I've finally got my own like proper recording studio office in my new place, I'll actually be able to print my own minis and things. I've got thousands of minis, but there's always more that I need. There's always more. I'm not much of a stereotypical dice hoarder of a dungeon master. I'm more of a mini hoarder. I'm like, nice. I've got 3 different types of dwarf mini, but do I have a dwarf that's also a woman who's also a rogue with a hood up and 2 different like no, I've got a female dwarf rogue with a hood down, but I don't have one. So, there's always more minis to be had. So when I saw the STLs as the add-on, I was like, yes, I absolutely do want a Tarask. So yeah, I kickstarted it myself. There's some amazing add-ons, amazing perks in there. People should go to this address to check it out. My mods will link it in the chat as well, I'm sure. I think it's on a timer that's coming up every so often. Let's start with the perks that have been added. What have we already achieved? What's currently coming out? What was in the base? Let's start there. What's going to be in the base thing at the before you hit any of your stretch goals? What was the original offer of? If you check out, we always had the box sets, so that was always there, like the dice, the merch, and all that stuff. But I know some of the stretch goals definitely got us some new minis. And like talking about minis, we should address the elephant in the room of the Tarask, the giant mini Tarask, which then got upgraded by a stretch goal, so you can actually get like it's called Sundrop style. So it's kind of painted. Basically, it's like primed. Yeah. I mean, I'm no stranger to minis that aren't mini, because a fan sent me this one a while back.
Let's see.
That is an 8-inch diameter base plate ancient white dragon.
Ooh.
That is the size of a cat.
That's awesome.
A cat with wings. It is absolutely enormous. And yeah, so I know that the minis is a it's a term that may make you think that something is smaller than it is. So tell people what about this Tarrasque. For anyone who's I'm sure that nobody in my D&D community doesn't know what a Tarrasque is by now, but in case, the Tarrasque is touted to be like the biggest, baddest monster in D&D. It isn't, for various reasons, and I intend on someday coming out with a video of explaining all of the reasons why the Tarrasque is actually really disappointing, and the ways that I've homebrewed my Tarrasque in my world to actually be the Challenger in 30 monster that it should be, with all kinds of regeneration and resistances and things. But it's
I've
meant
done
to be
exactly
like
the same thing.
It's meant to be like the Godzilla, essentially.
Yeah, kind of. It's a bit like a final boss in a way, a little way.
It's kind of like if your dungeon master throws a Tarrasque at you, it's them signaling that this is the end of the campaign because I'm done. I don't have anything else I can throw at you. This is that you kill this and you win. You're demigods. But then you did it just because on a wild surge.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had no choice in a way, because that's just how it was gonna happen. Like, God, yeah, because it was such a random moment. It was nothing planned. Just the fact they happened to be an alchemist quarry. They didn't know the Tarrasque was there, and they didn't know that in my notes prior to the session, I said it is bolted down with immovable rods and adamantine chains.
Yeah.
And I had no influence on the fact that Sips decided to not only sing in a karaoke bar, but decided to cast the spell Dancing Lights as a flourish. Well. It was just a flourish. There was no purpose to the spell.
Look at this.
Yeah, and then of course, wild magic happened, so that was only about a 30% chance of triggering, and so the odds are already immense.
Yeah.
Then it goes to the actual wild magic charts, and the ones I used had probably 500 plus different wild magic effects.
And where did you get those from? Like Reddit or something? Just like homebrewed things that somebody's made?
It was D&D Wiki, but eventually I added my own stuff onto it as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like you...
For the release, I made completely my own rules. Like so in the book on the Kickstarter, there's a completely new chart of, again, hundreds and hundreds of effects, and this one is definitely in it.
Which is one of the things I'm really looking forward to, because I play with a few wild magic sorcerers, and I'm really disappointed in the one that they give you in the PHB. It's got some fun things, but there's only 50 effects in there, and some of them are like, oh, you breathe feathers for a bit. Cool. But like, give me something that's like, interesting and permanent and changing.
Yeah.
Sorry. This crazy effect happens. The wild magic happens. Was the radius also like rolled for, or was that like in the thing it says?
I think it was. I can't recall if the radius was rolled for, but I believe it was. And which is like,
you had to do your maths. How far down?
We had to do the math. Because I mean, I'm from Germany, right? So we do everything in meters. So I couldn't visualize feet because it was like 2,000 feet. I'm like, okay, that's a lot of feet. But it happened to be that Tarrasque is there, and I was really hesitant about it because I'm like, okay, guys, there's some big stuff going to happen, but I don't know if I should do it, because this was a session where Julian and Gorthan weren't even there. They couldn't make it that time. It was like, what?
I can't throw a Tarrasque at them. What level were they at this point? Like level 6 or something?
Something like that. It was super low. And I'm just like,
I can't throw a Tarrasque at level 6 players when there's 2 of them missing.
What's going to happen? I asked them, like, okay, like, should I do this? And eventually Dingo was like screaming over the table, just like, do it, you pussy, just do it. I'm just like, okay, now I gotta do it. And
peer pressure.
Then I describe it. The immovable rods were completely dispelled. The Tarrasque was just like, oh, sweet, and gets up, bursts out of the ground, and the attack began. And that's when I ended the session, because it was actually the end of the session.
And
like, you guys think about what you've done.
Things.
Yeah. That was just and that moment was arguably the one that started this entire adventure, because that video was the first one Dingo made, and it got so much love and attention because people were just pissing themselves about this Tarrasque story.
Yeah.
And
it was like, what made, so Dingo was like, this is an incredible story, people need to hear it, and decided to animate it with no expectation that anybody would actually like it, right? It was just like, I'll just put it out there and just
and Dingo still takes that philosophy in like she has a similar philosophy in mind. Of course, we love and care for our fans, but she's using the approach of like, screw the numbers, screw the statistics. I'm gonna make these videos properly, like an animated show, like I want them to be. And she still does it that way, because technically, if you look at like like the meta of YouTube. It should be like short videos, less than 10 minutes, sometimes 1 minute long, and all that stuff. And we don't care about that. We make it properly.
Yeah, I fully agree with that attitude of being like, make the videos that you want to make. Don't worry too much about following this, because it's not healthy, in my opinion, the way that YouTube and lots of other sources are trying to push towards this shorter and shorter and shorter attention span content, just so that you'll get scrolling and forget how long you've been spending watching videos and things.
Yeah,
just allow us to make the longer videos that we want, and
please let us make them.
To hell with the algorithm, so to speak.
Yeah, and also, like, remember, this used to be the algorithm, like 10+ minutes was mandatory, and now it's suddenly like 1 minute. I'm just like, come on.
Here's a whole bunch of money to incentivize people to do short videos of a minute long, so that we can force people to stay on the platform. I agree, Schreider. Dingo's storytelling is amazing. She does a very good job of voicing what happens and like telling it in a storytelling fashion of like beginning, middle, end, with an arc to it, to each episode, as well as like telling your story of an overarching thing without giving certain parts away too soon.
And it's so funny because she really screwed me over in the actual campaign when she's like, Sips is gonna leave, right? And like do his own thing and the Calandria thing. And then Arena was just like, well, I guess I'm doing that too. And then Gothy and Arena split up too. So I'm still blaming Dingo for it entirely, even though it's technically not all her fault. But so I had to GM, I don't know, it was like 4 or 5 sessions doing these split sessions where essentially each one got 1 hour.
Yeah, that's something I really want to talk about here, because when it got to that moment in Dingo Doodles, when she's like, oh yeah, we split up, and so inevitably, and I was expecting the next words out of her mouth to be, inevitably, we did a time skip forwards 3 years until our characters come back together, and we carried on from there. No, she goes, inevitably, Felix runs a 3-way split of D&D, where not only a 3-way split, which would be crazy enough, but 3 individual 1-person campaigns, which of themselves are very difficult to run. So, and I was like, no, that's not the inevitability. That's not the outcome you should take from that decision. You instead go to those players and you say, oh, hey, Sips goes off and does his thing. You're gonna make a new character so that we can keep this party together over here. Because that's something that happened in my campaign relatively recently. There was like a huge falling out, interpersonal dynamics with not the players. Thankfully, they're all very good friends. But like the characters.
Yeah,
the characters had a huge falling out because somebody had decided to do something that the others were really not for. And one of my players said, I think my player is going to be leaving the campaign, at least for a while. And I said, fine, how do you want to deal with it? Would you like me to sort of one-on-one with you to see what's happening over here? And she's like, no, I'll make a new character that can join them for temporarily until this person gets over their thing and comes back. So I was expecting fully that was going to be the direction you take things. But what made you go, no, I just have to do this insanely difficult DMing task of running 3 campaigns simultaneously that all have 1 person in them?
Hard to say if there was a single thing that made me say I'm gonna do it. It was more like it didn't even cross my mind to make a fast forward or to like do new characters. I wanted to see these stories through, and that's when we just went for it. And we did talk amongst it ourselves too, but we all arrived at the same conclusion, like, let's just explore these. So, and I just warned them, hey, the sessions are going to be a bit weird because I only had 3 hours of time because of people's work schedule and dinner and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, everyone's going to get roughly an hour, and we're going to run through these, and eventually I'm going to bring you back together. And I'm having a bit of schadenfreude because now Dingo had to do the same with her YouTube series, so of making it flow nicely, making the plot simplified. That's
a very good point. I hadn't thought of that. Dingo has to. She can't reuse any of the animations from like people that they're meeting, NPCs that they're not all meeting the same people and going through the same stories. She's got 3 entirely new settings. Has to make all of the stories flow enjoyably.
Which she did amazingly. She
really
actually
did.
Pulled it off.
Oh yeah. Tell me about like the logistics of planning for that then, because as I say, like I've done split campaigns briefly where I try my best to try and like keep a track of where everybody is. They'll get to a town, they'll all go do some things, and I'll try and be like, all right, 5 minutes over here with you, what are you doing? Oh, next person. Meanwhile, while they're doing this, what are you doing?
Damn, I don't have that original notebook on me, but basically I plan, so every single one of my sessions is one of these pages. I never do more notes than that per session.
Right.
And all I simply did is I divided the page into 3 pieces and wrote my notes.
Okay. I mean, that gives you some straightforwardness, doesn't it? Like,
yeah,
to be like, one page is usually 3 hours content, so a third of a page should be each of them.
Exactly. And the thing is just that I didn't, like, how do I say? We didn't pre-plan the entire thing. You know, I'm not sure, like, okay, Sips is gonna, you know, go there. He's gonna do A, B, and C, and then it's gonna convince him to come back, and then we're gonna bring him back. Or, you know, Irina was gonna go off to this area. I didn't know when she was be coming back. So when I ran these split sessions, I didn't know when or how they would reconvene. I was just running the sessions, letting the players do what they wanted, and eventually introducing a few events and happenings that would bring them back together.
Right. And
it worked out, thank God. and eventually I managed to kind of synchronize them.
And at the table, you go like 5 minute, 5 minute, 5 minute. Like I think Dingo says in one of the things, it's like 20-minute chunks with each person. Is that generally how it worked out?
Yeah, it was roughly 20-minute chunks. It depends how the session was flowing, because I never just wanted to cut them off. Yeah. Usually trying to hit little checkpoints. But yeah, everybody got their chunk, and we just went around the table, so nobody got too bored. And luckily, our sessions are full of humor and nonsense, so nobody would get bored quickly.
And and thankfully with the right sort of group that enjoy each other's company and each other's stories, that's important. People can be having just as much fun watching somebody else's story play out. It's one of the things that I love about my home games is that if I'm over here talking with this person who's gone off on a scouting mission, these guys are all talking in character. They're like around a campfire, or they're doing their own thing and they're having a chat, and it's not distracting from us. It's one of the reasons I just really love in-person D&D, because you can do that sort of thing. You can't do that you can't do that on a Zoom call, because anybody's talking is the main person talking, and it's just distracting. But at a table, I can be talking to this person over here while these 3 people are talking amongst themselves, and it's not distracting for us. And then when I'm done with this scene, I can go back and be like, what was that discussion about? And they're like, oh, we were just deciding where we should go next, or whatever, blah blah blah.
Yeah. So the right players make a big difference, and luckily my team was just absolutely awesome. I love the players I have.
I bet you were thankful by that point that that the other 2 had left to deal with having a kid IRL, and you didn't have a 5-way one person each split.
Oh boy.
So the logistics of balancing one-person parties, how did you tackle that? Like, were you able to still throw monsters at them and have encounters and things? Because like a combat round can take a long time, especially, you know.
Oh, I mean, 1v1s are very quick encounters. And honestly, I kind of took the approach of like, you decided to split up. This is your problem, because the monsters are not going to suddenly all become weaker. You know, you brought yourself into a situation, you know adventuring alone is dangerous. Yeah. So I threw a T-Rex at Sips, because frankly, that's what he brought on himself. And to deal with that.
So in terms of balance, that's your general approach, because it comes back to the whole homebrew things as well. Like, you've got so many homebrew things in your game that like you don't worry about the balance so much. You just like, this is natural for this world, this amount of danger. It's up to you to decide whether or not something's a bit too much and you can run away from it.
Yeah, I definitely take that approach, but it's a bit of both. I do also carefully balance encounters. Like, even my homebrews, I do spend care to make sure, like, okay, this feels right. You know, this is the amount of power this creature would have. And if they encounter it, it's up to them. If they come up with a good strategy to defeat it, awesome. And if they feel, you know what, no, let's back off for now. Let's get some supplies, get some extra stuff, maybe grab the mech dragon, come back, and then kill this thing. And I warned them ahead of time. And now whenever I run one-shots, I also just warn the players. I say, look, I use not only some difficult encounters, that it's your choice if you want to fight or not, but I also use puzzle encounters that are designed not to be fought head-on. To be
tactically worked out a solution for,
Exactly. So I just tell them ahead of time. That way they're not like, oh, Felix, like this fight's bullshit. We can't kill it or anything. It's like they know what they're getting into, and then they're having a blast with it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that to people that aren't expecting it, because then it just feels like bullying.
Like, but I'm attacking this thing that we have no chance of killing.
Yeah, there's some players that feel this is especially newer players that come from like video games. They're just like, no, I'm the protagonist, I should be able to kill whatever I want. And it's like, no, not in my world. These things kill you unless you stop them.
It's it's definitely a difficult thing to do, but you've picked it up well. What would you say skills in your real life have lent themselves to being the dungeon master that you are? Like, why is it that, what do you reckon it takes to be able to do that sort of a thing? You've never had any improv background, you've never had any storytelling or writing, creative writing or anything? No,
not really. I did have a little bit of improv background, but just from like high school drama class. I never pursued it outside of school. I mean, I love video games. I love RPGs, and they're a big inspiration to me. And I just kind of thought I can do some cool stuff like that. And I kind of just went that way. I mean,
it's just a form of creativity, isn't it? It doesn't matter what your background is per se. Like, it's
you don't need certain skills to do
you
do it successfully or fail.
You could have an accountant or something that's just as creative in their dungeon mastering as somebody who's got a background, like an entire improv background their whole life. It's just, there are skills that are transferable, but there are skills, you can have those skills regardless of your background per se, which is positive for people who are trying to get into it.
There's nothing to be scared about. You should just go for it, experiment, fail, succeed, have fun.
Have some fun with it.
Just have fun. Don't try to replicate another GM or like another session you saw. Just make your own disaster and then enjoy it.
Make your own disaster. That's a t-shirt right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Make your own disaster with a nat 20 on it or something.
Yeah, with a nat 20. My smiling face, just like
make your own disaster. So getting back to the Kickstarter again, how did you decide on the stretch goals and what they were going to be? Logistically, like you were like, oh, I really want to include this, so I'll put it as one of the earliest stretch goals. Or like, this one's not going to be too much work, so I'll put it as an early stretch goal. Like, what?
I mean, a large portion of that was helped with our publisher, Hit Point Press. So we have all this content we want to make, and they were like, well, let's break it down. What is really important for the basics? What's a bit more extra? And what would we be willing to invest into if it really got out of hand in a nice way? So that's how we planned these things
how did you get in touch with Hit Point Press? How did that relationship begin?
Well, Hit Point Press was always the well, not always, but very early on became the primary sponsor of Dingo's videos, because they're just awesome people. We got along well.
Just by reaching out to you, or did you reach out to them? Like, how did that relationship first start?
They reached out to Dingo for a sponsorship opportunity, and the relationship really clicked. He bought like multiple sponsorships at once, and we really liked working with them because they let us do what we wanted to do. Let Dingo do what she wanted to do. And Dingo is actually kind of really good at selling, because she's really genuine. She's not so salesy. So we just got along really well. Then one day, almost exactly 2 years ago, we met with them at PAX Unplugged, and we just kind of dropped a funny line of just like Dingo went up to him, and I was there as well, and she was just like, haha, wouldn't it be funny if we made like a Fool's Gold campaign setting, because they just released the Humblewood setting, and he was just like, lunch,
do it
tomorrow.
Let's talk it through.
You there. And that was a very profitable lunch.
Yeah, I imagine so,
because that's when we decided to produce it, and we hashed out the details.
And tell me, as much as you can without spoilers, obviously, tell me what is in the campaign setting. What are people getting when they back this particular Kickstarter?
A lot more than most might think, actually. And I don't know if I did a good job in the descriptions to explain that, but if you look at the Dingo Doodles,
you've almost hit 1 million. I think you've done a fine job.
maybe, yes. But if you look at the Dingo Doodles video series, you're thinking like, oh, this is Fool's Gold. But Actually, that's maybe 25%, maybe 30% of what Fool's Gold is. There is a lot more to it in this entire big world that just doesn't fit into the videos because it'd be overwhelming and bloated and confusing. So in the book are a bunch of my homebrew
just as
rules.
Hold that thought real quick. It's just because I love that comes up in the videos as well, when in the early ones, especially when Dingo's like she realizes, oh, I never expected this to become a thing, and now it is a thing, and now I need to continue it, but I haven't actually explained all the backstory that's necessary to continue the story. So I have to include Sneeze now, and I have to talk about this. It's great that she's like self-referential in that way of being like, there's a lot to a D&D campaign, okay? I can't tell you every little bit about it. Just take my word for it that Mr. Wizardly is a thing, a person that we know. Move on. Anyway.
But it's more than that too. It's even outside of, like, if you took the entire Fool's Gold campaign that they played, even the stuff that may never end up on video, there's still more to the world than they never saw.
Yeah, for sure.
Just because they didn't go in those areas.
Which is why I love that I host like 4 or so campaigns in the same world. I've got 2 different home campaigns. One person hires me as a dungeon master, and I run a game in the same world. And then on my streams here on Twitch every Saturday, I run an interactive game as well, where the audience can decide what the character's doing. And those are all set in the same world, and even in the same part of the world, the same continent. And so I get to explore more of my world because of that, thankfully, because I'm like, I really want them to come over here, but nobody's coming over here for any reason. And then I can run one-shots in my world, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to set it in this place because nobody's ever given me a reason to flesh out this continent yet, and I'm going to do that. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention, of course, that the Bellowing Wilds, the jungle where it takes place, is part of a huge world map, which has not even been revealed yet.
So is it revealed in the campaign?
Focusing on one region. I said I want to do this one region really well because I can't do the entire world really well. It's too much.
Yeah, you'd stretch yourself too thin. So so what is revealed in this campaign? Do we see the world map?
So you don't get the entire world map, but you do get some entire world lore. Right. I include all the background lore on my gods and my over gods, which are a thing, and I have them in the book.
Like the gods of the gods, like the
management.
The god management.
There's world creation lore, and what else do I have?
And there's a region map of the Bellowing Wilds.
We got a super beautifully drawn region map. We've got all the lore on the Bellowing Wilds from the inception of like how it came to be and how Foreclaimers came there and how they disappeared. So you get the entire lore. You get the lore of every city, every key location, every key NPC. You get their motivations. You get the full background.
Good Lord.
So in terms of lore, there's
it's heavy.
There's a shit ton. There's a lot, and you can use as much as you like. If you don't care about the details or you want to do your own, throw them out.
You can grab a single city and be like, I love the city. Totally. It doesn't have to be I'm going to put it in a desert in my own world over here, and
Yep. Exactly. So you make your own disaster.
Make your own disaster.
Also, I've got a lot of monsters in there. Again, some of which the original party encountered, some of which they never encountered. Same with items, NPCs. I've got new schools of magic in the book. There's soul magic, which is a banned version of magic by the gods. And there's a second magic called oniromancy, which is the magic of dreams.
Oh.
So an entire school just dedicated to dream magic.
That's cool. That is something that I've noticed myself is a little bit lacking. Is like a dream realm. There's realms of chaos where you can manipulate in like the official settings. I mean, is like there's chaos realms where you can manipulate things by thinking about them and stuff. That feels like dreamish, and then there's the Feywild, which is very dreamlike. But there's not like a realm of dreams where people literally are transported to when they're dreaming.
And you can actually enter that realm.
You can enter that realm and manipulate people's dreams and things, and it's something that I've never gone down that aspect of world building, but it's something that I've always toyed with of being like, when people are casting the 5th level spell Dream and they're manipulating other people's dreams and arriving in their dreams to be messengers, I would love it if they were actually transporting themselves to a physical location with that person who happens to be in a dream-like realm, where the other laws of the game, the mechanics of the game, don't necessarily apply. Like damage you take in the dream realm doesn't necessarily tip over and things like that. So it seems like you have put some thought into that and put some dream magic in it.
Yeah, I really went all out on the lore because I checked with like the editors and it's like, well, how much should I include? And they're just give us everything. Like
Whatever you
people
want.
are starving for this, so give us all the lore you have. And it's like, okay, you asked for it, it's coming.
Yeah. And so tell me, how much of that have you done already, and how much is to be done once the Kickstarter is funded and you've got X number of months to actually deliver on it?
So I've got pretty much a majority, how do I say that? A majority of the content has been written down, but English is my second language and I need a bit of writing help. So now it has to be beautified. Let's call it that way. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. Like right. I actually wrote a really large portion of it and fairly decently, but sometimes my vocabulary can be a bit limited or so. And now it's kind of like they might reorganize a few things in the book. They might add a few details, remove a few unnecessary ones.
And then of course all of the artwork and things needs to be put in. All of the will Dingo and Bees be doing artwork for it, being that they're both artists? Yeah, they're both doing artwork for it, and Bees, aka Gothy, is actually the lead artist on the book. So there's tons of her wonderful art in there. If you want to see more of Bees' art, you can check her out on Twitter and I think Instagram, presumably. But also, she did the artwork for our characters in the one shot that you ran for us in the Fool's Gold setting, where I played the Goblin. And we'll be returning to that setting on my channel here. If you guys are here from another community, if you've come over from the Dingo Doodles community, welcome. I'm Robert Hartley. Stick around. I'll be playing in a one shot set in the Fool's Gold world with some good friends of mine later today on my channel. So you'll see some of the artwork. I believe Arena's character, Arena's player, and Gothy's player will be joining us as well.
That's right. Which brings me to like a really cool thing of this whole Kickstarter is this is the first time ever where I have GM'd a session, I've done an adventure, and now a new GM comes in and takes it over and continues it. I've never had happen before.
Weird feeling, isn't it? It's happened to me once where a friend who was playing in my campaign, his character had to leave and he's now sort of more of an NPC in the world. But he got in touch and said, would you mind if I like take a completely different area of your world and like use that as my setting? And I fleshed that out, and it started as like a one shot, and then it went really well, and I actually played in it, and I was like playing in an area of my world. And then after that one shot went really well, he was like, can I continue here? And I was like, sure. And now he's just kind of turned it into his own thing, and it's sort of like a fan world, I guess. Like if I got there, I wouldn't feel obligated to make changes to my world based on what he's done in his. But it was
alternate universe
sort of type thing, But it's a weird feeling to be having your world given out to other people. Is there like trepidation there? Is there a sense of like, what if they fuck it up? It's my baby. Is there any of that?
What's trepidation mean?
Trepidation's like worry or like hesitancy, reluctancy and concern. No?
Yeah, no, none of that. So in a way, it kind of feels like this has been my baby for so long. It's ready. It's grown up now. It's ready to go out into the world. And honestly, I'm just super, super, super excited to hear people's stories because there is so much open world sandbox content. All the stories are going to be different that people explore in there. So I'm just excited to hear like, oh, we released a Tarask today, and then we like befriended it and used it to like kill Gresh or something like that. Or like we actually teamed up with Gresh and burned down the jungle. Like you can do all these things.
Yeah.
And I'm just excited to hear what people are getting up to. And like I've been getting messages even already, people like, hey, when this comes out, is it okay if I like make like a professional stream with this? And I was just like, yeah, that's pretty awesome.
I guess I'm in that position now of my life where I can be getting those sorts of comments from people. Yeah. Weird, eh?
That's the best part of it all. It's just I'm just hearing other people's experiences soon with it and their opinions, because 500 plus wild magic effects. I'm excited to hear what effects ruined campaigns.
Yeah, because I imagine there's some. I mean, the consequences of the area of anti-magic that happened was potentially world-ending, but it wasn't the Wild Surge itself. Are there Wild Surge effects that can just be like similar to the danger level of pulling from a deck of many things, like where suddenly your soul is whisked away to another plane and you're just dead? Like,
no, because that's lame.
Yeah, that's what I was worried of.
If I'm gonna kill a player, I wanted to see it coming at them slowly and let them react to it.
Yeah.
You know, a Taras can menacingly stomp towards them and give them time to think.
Yeah.
Versus just, you know, you end up in the Trask belly and die. It's like, well, that's lame, you know. There was actually, I remember in the original charts, there was an effect like that where you get stuck in a time bubble and time advances by 1,000 years, and then you are released. And it's like,
oh, okay. So my entire campaign's
everything
just
is dead now.
Yeah, everything, everything I was working on, except for maybe the oldest lived druids and elves, they're just all dead. Why would that be? Like that's something you shouldn't get as a wild magic thing. That's an effect that your DM should be able to put into the game if they are bored of the current setting entirely and just want to start fresh.
Exactly. So are there effects in there that can end the world 100%? But they're all at least fair enough not to insta-KO or insta-kill you, because that's just lame. Like they all, and I should add to that, so there's the wild magic effects, but there's also over 100 curses. And it's the same deal with them. They all give you time to react, to experience it, to play with them, and you could die, or you can realistically do something about it. And that's more fun.
It feels like you and I have very similar mindsets about how we approach D&D and how we think about it and stuff. I am happy with killing a character. Not going to kill a player again. Your Honor, I swear, you can't use this as evidence. I'm happy to kill a player character if I feel like they have made the decision to get themselves into this situation and they're in peril, or if they... I'm happy to kill a player character with a complete blind side, they didn't see it coming, but only if it's a consequence for something else. Like one time one of the encounters I give to my home game that I thought was heavily weighted against them, that they would like, it was going to be the start of an entire arc. They were going to get defeated heavily in this fight and then go on to do this other thing. Because it was a recurring villain. It was a villain that they'd let go from a previous fight with one arm. They'd lopped off his arm and let him go, and he was a sorcerer, and he was really bitter about it. So eventually he found them again and tracked them down and attacked them, and it was going to be like a huge epic fight where he was going to subdue them. He was going to take off one of each of their arms, and then their whole next arc was going to be having to find this sort of... mythical or legendary healer that lives up in the mountains somewhere that can cast regenerate, and they can grow their arms back and then track down the recurring villain and get revenge or whatever, blah blah blah. Yeah, they ended up not running from that fight that was heavily weighted against them, and they actually won. They were all like, it was one of these fights where they go down, like yo-yoing, properly going down and up and down. And there was a paladin in the fight. One guy has levels in bard and he had the healing word, and they were just going down. Potion here, a healing word there. Everybody getting back at, like, oh, we can finally take out the tiefling that's been casting heat metal on the fighter in his full plate. And okay, he's dealt with now. It was a hugely, very, very close battle. And then the final guy, the guy with the arm lopped off, the recurring villain, he knocked out the fighter one last time and then legged it with his movement. The fighter on his turn got a nat 20 on his death save, so he got back up to 1 hit point, and he ran after him. But because he had to get up from prone, he couldn't get all the way to him as he's running down the street. And so instead, he uses his levels in bard to shout vicious mockery at this guy who had only 2 hit points left. He viciously mocked this recurring villain to death, and I flavored it. I flavored it as being this guy just like he sees that you're back up for like the 4th time this fight, and he just drops to his knees and goes, "Why won't you die? Why won't you stay?" And he just like goes into a heap and collapses. So they walk over, they tie him up. It was epic. But then they put him in a sack, wondering what to do with him. And they forgot again that he's a sorcerer with like access to blink or something. So he changes some of his sorcery points to spell slots, casts blink, and disappears. And so now for a 3rd time, he's going to be a recurring villain, and he's going to come back. So
what? That's going to be such an epic showdown. My god!
They've learned his name, and they keep deliberately forgetting it because they just called him Arnold instead. Arnold. yeah. We're not even afraid of you. I think his vicious mockery was something like, "We're not even afraid of you. You're armless. You're practically armless to us." And he was just like, "No." So for things like that, I'm happy to blindside them and kill them. If it's something that they've done that has come back to bite them in the ass, and they haven't been watching their back, they haven't been looking over their shoulder in that same town when they go back and things like that. But yeah, I'm like you in a lot of ways that I won't just have a random effect. That's why I don't use the deck of many things. Like I won't just have a random effect suddenly kill a character or whisk them away to another plane of existence, or suddenly introduces a monster that has no reason to be there, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the only, like, the closest to an instant death effect that I have is there's a single wild magic. No, it's a curse. So it's a curse that you can be befallen by. That if you go down, and if you have this curse and then you fall down in a fight, like you drop to 0 HP, you get insta-killed. However, you also get insta-resurrected as a wraith.
Oh.
So it can turn your character into a wraith. That is the single, like, worst curse I would say I have in terms of instant kills.
And would you rule that then the player has to roll a new character, or would you talk to them at that point and be like, let's restat your character as a wraith and you still have control?
Oh no, it's restat. Like, here you go, here's your wraith character sheet.
Right. And they still have their own mindset, they still have their own alignment and things. Yeah. You're just now a wraith.
I don't really prohibit people from playing monsters and stuff, because like, if you look back to 3.5, a lot of monsters had level adjustments. That means you could play them as characters.
Right.
And I did the same for the wraiths. There's actually, if you buy the book, if you go to the city of Rascom, you will find a unique bookshop that's actually owned by 2 wraiths. And they just run the bookstore as distinguished citizens of Rascom. Everybody knows them. They're like, oh yeah, they're nice. For some reason, they're not evil. We like them.
I like that.
So, yeah. Same for the players here.
So what are you, in terms of 3.5, since you mentioned it, that's just what you were familiar with? Because the whole of Dingo Doodles campaign, that particular campaign's long done now, right? That's over?
Yeah, that's been done.
And it was entirely 3.5, right?
Yep, that's right.
And what was that a choice that you made, or was it just the only D&D that you were familiar with at the time?
I got started with 3.5 when 5e wasn't, I don't think it was even out at the time when I got started. And then it was just what I was familiar with, and I thought, well, that's what I play, that's what my players know, why switch? I had no reason to, so I just continued with 3.5. And to be honest, I'm even like still debating if the next campaign I'll do 3.5 or 5, just because I enjoy 3.5 quite a bit. Even if I have to convert everything for the book, I still like it.
I've never played editions other than 5. Can you sort of tell me what about 3.5 you enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I usually summarize them where there's like, you can kind of have 2 different definitions. You can say 5e is a bit like simplified D&D, and 3.5 is more like not advanced really. It's more like, I guess you could call it advanced, but it's more like there's more numbers and technical stuff to it. So yeah, it's more crunch, because with 5e they said, well, you know, let's do away with a lot of the rules. Let's make it a bit more open and make it more welcoming to new players, which totally worked.
Oh yeah.
And with 3.5, it's like, no, we got everything figured out to the fucking like centimeter about how rules apply to everything, and that is just how I started, and I just enjoy a lot. Like, I love doing that nitty gritty character development, and just like,
interestingly,
like, you have this and stuff.
Interestingly though, your DM style is very much a let's go for it. Like, the fun comes first above the rules, right? So
definitely,
I would have thought that would have lend itself to an edition in 5th edition where the rules are already simplified, and you don't need, and there is more of a focus on just making the rules up. So the rules are guidelines, rulings rather than rules. Why is it? What do you reckon that disparity is, that you enjoy the edition of 3.5 because it's so crunchy and has rules set out for everything, but you enjoy your DM style to be fun comes first?
Yeah, well, it actually kind of plays into each other. Like, you're totally right, because 5e is more open to homebrew, kind of like that. But 3.5 is also very open to homebrew, but they also give you a ton of opportunity to homebrew within existing rules. Like, they have templates, they have guides, like, this is how you make monsters and stuff like that. And it's more in depth, and it takes a bit longer to homebrew, but you can still homebrew all of the numbers, just a lot more numbers. And I enjoy it a bit more, but it could also be just because that's what I got started with. I'm not disliking 5e at all. I enjoy both, but maybe it's because I've just played 3.5 a lot longer.
It's more familiar. Yeah. Feels...
But I wouldn't like. I treat them really separate. Like they're not like this is the first one and then the next one came and now you should play the new version. It's more like if you really want to keep it simple, you just want to dive into a story with friends, play 5e.
Yeah.
If you want to be crunchy, if you want to really build every aspect of your character, 3.5 is your home. There you go. So
I like
yeah.
that. I like that.
And,
yeah, I'm definitely keen to give it a go sometime. Like I've long wanted to try out even like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I want to see what the Thaco system was like, and
that's on my to-do list.
Yeah, I want to actually give a few, like not just like a one shot either, like to really get into it for like several sessions, just to really feel like I can go, okay, I understand what it was like to play this.
Yeah,
and it's the same with 3.5. I'd love to do so at some point.
Definitely.
So after the Dingo Doodles, the one that is currently happening, is there a name for that particular campaign that you have? Like, is that obviously it's Fool's Gold, but that's the world, right?
The current code name we have for it is Sands.
Sands,
like a desert.
Right. Okay.
It's just called Fool's Gold Sands for now until I give it its final name if it comes to be. But it's definitely hinting at the fact that it's going to happen in a desert.
Yeah. So Sands, sorry, is the new campaign.
That would be the new one. Yeah.
Yeah, and the one that is the one that we're seeing on Dingo Doodles with the Tarrasque and Sips and all of those. Is there a name for that particular campaign? Fool's Gold.
Into the Bellowing Wilds.
That is the Into the Bellowing Wilds is the name of that campaign, not just this module.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess it was called Bellowing Wilds, but Into the Bellowing Wilds is a lot nicer of a title.
Yeah, it does roll off the tongue really, really nicely. And that's because the entire campaign, pretty much with the exception of when they split up and went to different countries and things, the thing takes place in the Bellowing Wilds, the jungle, right?
That's right. The entire thing takes place just in the Bellowing Wilds. So that's enabled me to really flesh out the entire jungle, which is actually a lot bigger than you think when you take into account all the lores and cities within. And then if we reach the 1 million, we're going to add a little chunk to the northeast of that, Kylandria,
where Arena went on her side things.
That's right.
And
so we'll add a lot more NPCs and content there.
That's one of the things I think a lot of new dungeon masters will learn, because I certainly did when I was playing, how little space your campaign can be constricted to. When I was creating my world, I came up with the entire world and continents over here and here and here because I thought that they would come up, and they haven't. Not only have they not explored the entire continent they're on, they're set in a country which is an archipelago, and they're level 10 now, and they haven't left the island that they started on. I'm like, okay, so you can start your campaign at this portion of your world, and you don't need like some people world building, they like to go start big and go in. They start on the outside and work their way in. Like they create the world, they create the universe, they think about the lore and the backstory of everything, and then they work into where they're starting. And other people like to start at, you're going to be starting in this village. I don't know what's around it yet, but we'll work that out. And that's perfectly valid one, because of how little space a campaign can take up. You can have very little in the way of travel and distances between stuff. You can confine it all to one region of one country.
And it allows you to flesh things out within it more, especially things like NPCs and relationships.
So after the Bellowing Wilds campaign finished, how long ago did that end, by the way?
I think that was 3 or 4 years ago. If Dingo's in the chat, she will know the exact number because she has way better with dates than I am. But yeah, I think it was about 3-4 years ago.
And then that ended, and you went on to another campaign, or you gave the reins to some other DM so that you could play for a while, or what happened after that?
2018 June. Thanks, honey. Yeah, that's the one.
Is that Dingo? Electro Bunny Comics. Hello.
That's her. Yeah.
lovely to have you in the chat, Dingo. I love your work.
So yeah, what happened after that? I actually had a, like, how would I call it? Like an unofficial Fool's Gold sequel. It was new characters though.
Right.
But that's not an adventure we're ever going to publish. Instead, actually, parts of that I have moved into the Bellowing Wild setting to kind of wrap it all together into one big bundle.
Right. Okay. So
But we did play another campaign, and we finished that up, and it explored a lot more of the higher level stuff, like higher concepts like gods and overgods and those sorts of things.
So was it a short campaign that took place in higher level adventurers? Like you started them at level 15 or something? Was it that kind of?
No, they did start again from the ground up, but they worked themselves up to godhood.
Oh wow! So it was a long running campaign then.
It was long-ish. I think it was a bit shorter than the Bellowing Wilds campaign, and it was with less players. But
how often do you play to manage to get through so much content?
Once a week.
It's impressive for adults to find that time on the regular to actually work. I run a few different home games, and it started out once a week, then it went to once a fortnight, and then just by necessity of me going back to university and things, it dropped to like once a month, and then there were huge swaths of like 6 months where we'd never play. And then my friend moved to Japan earlier this year, and we only just started his campaign up again online just last week or the week before. So it just, unfortunately, I find that they've been playing that game for like 5 years and they're only level 10 because like it just takes too long to actually get back to it. I'd love to have a situation where I can just take people once a week all the way up through the campaign.
Yeah,
but, hey,
yeah, we used to play just once a week, pretty tight 3-hour long sessions, sometimes even only just 2.5, and we managed to stick to that schedule fairly well. I think we only miss like maybe 2 sessions per year tops.
Right, that's very impressive. Yeah. Very impressive indeed.
Thank you. That's why we say I love my players, because they're so dedicated.
Yeah, and it doesn't help as well that my and I love my players for it. The type of game that they like to play is very roleplay heavy. And so an entire session can happen where it's basically real time, where they're just sitting around a campfire and they're discussing what's just happened and why it was not ethical for us to do that way. Or they're going inventory management and they've opened up their magic house that they have, and they're going in and they're like cleaning things out and talking about where they go next, and having inter-party fights and things. And it's basically real time. And we get to the end of the session after 3 hours and no dice has been rolled. And it's fine, but then it's fine, but it does mean that we haven't progressed towards like another level or like another plot point. And so now it's going to be another 2 weeks before we actually play again, and we actually end up this particular day that we're on. And
but at least there's the rule that, as long as everybody had fun, it's not a wasted session.
It's not a wasted session at all. And so like it does mean that the time scale goes like, we've been playing in real life for 5 years. How much time has passed in game? 2 months.
2 months.
Because we've had every session is like 1 day at most. It's a weird dynamic. So you went Bellowing Wilds, and then you did this other campaign. Did you give that a code name of sorts that you refer to it as, the so and so campaign, or? Yeah,
it was called Rise of the I don't want to say it wrong. Because it has a long version and a short version. The short version was Crimson Sun.
Right.
I think the long version of it was Rise of the Crimson Sun. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dingo, but I think that's what it was. I should know this. It was Rise of the Second Sun. Thanks, Arena. Yeah, it was. Rise of the Second Sun.
Rise of the Second Sun. Rise of the Second Sun, and then after Rise of the Second Sun finished, you went straight into Sands?
It would be Sands. I haven't done it yet.
You haven't started yet.
That will be the next one.
That is the next one. So when did Rise of the Second Sun, the Second Sun end? How recently did that finish?
That finished this year in May, I believe.
Right. And since then you've just been focused on getting this Kickstarter out, or what's been the time sink for you?
Right.
Do you ever get to play anymore? You've not started a campaign with somebody else so that you can get the chance to play, or?
I'm definitely playing. I'm just not DMing. So the Gothy's player has been running a D&D campaign for a few years now that we're still going strong. If you check on her Twitter, at DynaBees with a Z, you'll always see fan art of that campaign there.
Nice.
And that's the one we're still playing. But for DMing, I've only been DMing one-shots. Honestly, I'm worried I'm getting rusty. So, but
I genuinely have that fear. With us being in lockdown in New Zealand for the last, seems like a million years, probably like 3 months or something. I started recently going, what if when I start back again, I'm crap? What if it takes me like several sessions to get back? And one of the first games that I have to play once lockdown ends, we'll be getting into it immediately because the content has run out for it, is the Viva La Dirt League stuff that goes out onto the YouTube page. We release every week a half-an-hour chunk, and so we usually film once every 3 months or so. We film one table session of about 6 hours, and we split it up into half-hour chunks. and release them over a weekly period. And now this week coming out, what day is it? Is it Thursday today? Yeah, tonight is the penultimate episode of what we've got actually filmed. And so we've run out of content because we haven't had a chance to film in the lockdown. So as soon as lockdown is over, as soon as we even get the word that lockdown is over, I'm going to get the message from Viva saying like, all right, you need to film again. And it'll probably be my first game that I've played in person in like 3 months. It'll be crap. I'm terrified that I'm going to be rusty and my vocabulary's all going to be gone. I'm not going to be able to describe things. I need practice. I need to get my flatmates to run a game with me.
Well, luckily I can soothe your nerves because turns out DMing is like riding a bicycle and you don't forget it. Because when I DM'd for you guys, that was my first one-shot in a long time, and I was terrified.
It was very enjoyable.
And it worked out just fine. So don't worry too much about it. I don't think getting rusty as a DM is really a thing.
Good. I think it's just little things like your ability to pull words to mind in the moment, or to remember NPCs, I feel, is a big one. If I get back to a campaign that I haven't done in a while, I'll be like, what's the name of that guy that you meet, or whatever. Yeah, little things like that. But as long as I've done the prep work for it and I've got all my notes, I should be fine, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me just double check my notes, my very small notes that I had for this, in case there's things that we haven't touched on.
So prepared. Actually, one thing I can touch on, because we were talking about what's in the campaign setting. One more really cool thing is Gothy's alchemy potions and brewing. Oh, right, yes. Stuff. That's actually in the book, which was a system I developed actually at the start of the Fool's Gold campaign. And now I've rebalanced it for 5e, so it's actually usable by everyone.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can actually go make 1 million potions with it. I'm very proud of it, and I want you guys to go break it and have fun with it.
That's really exciting. I've got I've come up with my own brewing, because it's things. Do you ever find when you're DMing that you spend time putting in work to something that you as a player would love to explore, but nobody else really does, and you're like, oh, I wish I could play in my games because I really want to explore these rules of how this would work, and so that's why I came up with rules for that, but they've never come into play in an actual game because nobody else is interested. I found that anyway.
Well, I get what you mean. Like, luckily, I feel like I play in my worlds because of my NPCs. You know, they're kind of like players, and because I do so much improv, I do that. I do it on purpose because I want to explore the world as my players explore it, and that is why I do so much improv. Is I am sitting at the table just as excited as they are to find out what's behind the next corner. You know, what's going to happen. Because I literally don't know, I'm going to respond on the spot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So of course I plan some stuff for sure, but not everything.
But yeah, I say so because I have I came up with quite intricate rules on how potion brewing would work, like in case people wanted to go potion brewing, because I knew that as a player, playing an alchemist is something I've always been interested in, like playing somebody who does brew their own potions in their downtime and things. Or poisons.
You're gonna love this.
and nobody's ever really been interested in that in my games. So I was like, okay, well, those potion brewing rules have kind of gone to the side, and I've never had a chance to like play test them. So I'm really that's something I'm excited for when I get the book. When is it due for delivery, by the way?
So the current estimate is for September of next year.
Cool.
That should be the final delivery date.
Exciting.
I'm thinking it might come sooner, but of course we can't promise that.
No,
so we just said September for sure. If it's earlier, great.
Yeah. That's the better way to do it rather than promise earlier and not deliver.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's something I'm excited about, to see your potion brewing rules and see what I can nab from them to supplement my own. For sure.
I saw someone in chat here asking for DM tips. Do we want to do?
Yeah, that was the last thing on my notes of things we should talk about.
Psychic.
Open. I tell you, me and you, we're on the same page at a lot of things, it seems.
Yeah, it works out.
Yeah, I was going to open it up finally to the chat. I apologize to the chat that I have been ignoring you mostly for this session, but hopefully you've enjoyed being a fly on the wall of this conversation. Why not start asking us some questions, guys, and we'll answer some questions from the chat.
Yeah, I mean, I see the DM tips
Please.
for new GMs and stuff like that. So do's and don'ts, helpful hints and suggestions. I mean, there's too many because there's really tons of stuff. But the simplest one I can give is always focus on having fun as a new DM. Don't try to copy someone. Don't try to make it this perfect version in your head, because it'll never happen. Just have fun, make your players laugh, make yourself laugh. You've succeeded. Total success. Doesn't matter if the entire campaign was a shit show. As long as everybody laughed, you did well.
Yeah. I am of the... This is something that I find to be... It can be potentially controversial, but I find myself gravitating towards know the rules very well before you try and bend and break the rules. Know... Like, if you look at a character... If you're new to DMing and you look at a monster and you think, that seems overpowered or underpowered, and you change it before you use it, you might not realize that it is actually balanced because of these other reasons, or because it's only getting one action per round, and so the action economy works out for the balance. All sorts of other reasons. I always say, try and use rules as written first, and until you know the game, and then you can work out which parts that you don't like, which parts you can change. Yeah. What would you say about that? To do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't find that controversial at all, because by knowing all of the rules and how they work, you know how to break them right.
Yes.
Not against homebrew. If you guys just want to dive right in, make your own story, whatever. Go for it if you're having fun. You've succeeded, you've won. Rule number 1 is all good.
Yeah.
But if you really want to make some balanced stuff, learn all the rules in order to learn how to break them. And your homebrews will just become better.
Yeah. Because you'll
think your homebrews are top shit, but they'll be even better.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. All right.
There was one other tip I was going to pass on, because I announced it during my stream yesterday, which is when people are afraid of improv. They're saying, how can you get over the fear?
Right.
And the thing I tell them is just go for it. Don't worry about the plot holes, because if plot holes come up, all you do is you put your hands together, crack a smile, and you say, isn't that interesting? When someone calls out your plot hole.
It's such a huge tip for DMs. Everything was intentional. You just
turn that bug into a feature.
Everything was intentional. You even with world building stuff, like maps that shouldn't exist because you didn't realize that, why would there be a lone mountain? Lone mountains don't exist. The Hobbit was really bad for that. In geography, lone mountains don't exist. Mountains are always a part of like a mountain range. So if a lone mountain exists in your world, and somebody points it out to you because they're a geography nerd, and they're like, why is there a lone mountain here? You can be like, why is there a lone? Maybe you want to look into that. And then in the meantime, you're like, how could there be? Maybe it was a giant earth elemental that got frozen and now he's a mountain. Like, there's always something. You can be like, why would there be a river running through a desert? That doesn't make sense. Yeah, but why is there a river running through the desert? Again, you put your fingers together and smile, and now it's a feature. It's definitely something that I recommend as well. Everything is intentional, and then you can come up with the reason for it retroactively.
Yeah, exactly. Just wait till the end of the session. You go, and then on your own notes with no players around, you figure out your shit show of what the hell you just did.
And
shit!
By
next
what did I just say?
You'll be ready.
Yeah, exactly. And don't be afraid in that same sort of vein. Don't be afraid to change something that you'd thought was there already. You'd been like, I can't include this monster because they wouldn't exist in this, and you're like, I want to include this monster. I'll include the monster, and then I'll work out why they're there later. I'll need a reason for why they're there in the moment when they're actually fighting. That's fine. Like the very specifics of this particular moment, why are they there? But in the grander scheme of like, why were they there? What brought them to this area, and why were they what were they existing on, and stuff like that. You can work all that stuff out when it's actually important.
Exactly. So don't be afraid of plot holes. They serve you. They're not against you.
All right, let's see if we can get more questions from the chat. How does the Heisenberg generator work? Not sure that's a question I can answer, sorry. When in doubt, it's a mad wizard. That's one of the wonderful things, Kolnick, about how it's a world of magic. It's high fantasy, and there's magic exists. So if in doubt, magic. Why is that the case? Magic.
Magic.
All according to plan. Yes.
And some stuff, unless your players ask about it, might not even be relevant.
Yeah.
For example, they never asked me why the Tarrasque is in the Bellowing Wilds. They never asked me that. You know what? Who the first person was that asked me was my editor on the book. So that was like literally 2 weeks ago that the
Not
actual
even the comments
reason
being
came
like,
out.
why is there a Tarrasque there?
Nobody cared about it. They were just like, hell yeah, it's a Tarrasque. Nobody said,
there's a Tarrasque there.
Why is it there?
Yeah, but why? Can I go into the lore and try and find the plot hole as to why it wouldn't be there?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I can give you a little teaser. Basically, the gods looked at the Four Claimers and they were like, no, that's not working out. Send in the Tarrasque. And the Four Claimers went, that's ours now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that.
That's all I'll say on it. There's a lot more, but that's a teaser.
Oh, I like that. That's cool. That's very cool. Back to the Tarrasque. Question about the design of it. The incredible looking mini that you're going to get that's about the size of a small dog. Who designed that?
So the concept art, like the actual like visual like 2D design of it, that was done by Gothy, and then it was actually modeled by I forget the last name, but it was Thomas. If you look on the model, it'll say the full name of that modeler that did it.
Right.
But Gothy actually put together all the elements, and she knows I love Bowser so much, so there's tons of Bowser elements in there.
I did see Bowser in it, yeah.
And we play Monster Hunter all the time, so she had way too much inspiration, and she could just go nuts on it.
Nice.
And I mean, God, it's an 11 out of 10 Tarrasque.
It's a wonderful mini, and I was actually thinking that when I get the mini, when I've printed it myself and had it painted up and everything, that's probably what will finally inspire me to refilm the Tarrasque video that I have for my YouTube, because I had like a series of videos happening, and I did the first two, and they were, and then the third at the end of the second one, I was like, oh, so my next video is going to be about all the ways that the Tarrasque is shit and all the ways that I've fixed it. And I filmed a one-shot with level 20 characters, friends of mine, fighting the Tarrasque as written. And I gave them the sort of legendary items that they would have as a level 20 party, and I just set them up in a simple sort of battle situation. The Tarrasque is coming to attack the town that you're in, and if it gets to the town, you lose. If you kill it before that, you win. Mm-hmm. They annihilate it. They just breeze through it, as you'd expect, even though it's a challenge written 30 monster. And I was like, okay. And then I did the exact same scenario, exact same characters, exact same everything, except I used my homebrewed Tarrasque, and I don't want to give too much away, because if you want my stats for the Tarrasque, it's available on my Patreon. But one of the features I was particularly proud of is that it has the ability to adapt to your fighting style. So if you are after you've dealt a certain amount of piercing damage to it, it becomes resistant to piercing damage, and after you've dealt a certain amount more, it becomes immune to piercing damage. And so you have to be adapting how you're fighting it. You can't just be like hack and slash until it's dead. One of the fighters took for his legendary item a +3 longsword, and then he took like a potion of sharpening, or whatever it's called, oil of sharpness, and so it's like a +6 longsword, and he was hacking and slashing at these legs with his action surge, doing immense amounts of damage very quickly. Round 3 of the fight, slashing is immune now, and so he was like, oh fuck, I'm a fighter, this is all I've got. And I think I can't fully remember, because I filmed all of these things. I filmed both things. I edited them. I went to edit them together. All of the footage was corrupt, and so I lost the whole thing, which is why I never actually got around to making it as a video. And I got off put, and then started Twitch streaming, and it just became a project that was pushed back further and further and further. But it's something that's been on my mind for a while, and I was like, I would love to make that as an actual video still, outlining all the reasons I dislike the Tarrasque as written.
Totally. I actually went through and like all the Tarrasque versions, like the OG D&D Tarrasques all the way back to AD&D, and kind of combined all their best parts into this new Tarrasque, because I wanted to, like, I didn't try to just make my own. I wanted to make it the way it should have been, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's what I did for that one. But man, I just get into thought, like, we should take your Tarrasque and my Tarrasque, and we should just, it'll be like a DM versus to kill each other with the Tarrasque. Oh yes, it'll be like kaiju monsters, like Pokemon kaiju.
Yes. Oh my god, I'm 100% down with that. That would be amazing.
That'd be fun. We should do that.
So down for that. Yeah, 100%. Let's actually do it.
Just pitting homebrew monsters up against one another.
Tarrasque against Tarrasque, and then like the whole battle arena can be people trying to fight them both at the same time, or trying to run away, or there's collateral damage happening that people are trying to. That sounds fun. We should definitely do that.
Sure.
Question: my players can't stand infighting or in stealing. How do you approach these, considering how many times Sips cursed and threatened the other members?
Well, if your players can't stand it, then why would it be happening in your game?
Yeah, if your players don't like it, don't include it.
Yeah, because what if like it's infighting, right? So that's done by the players to the players. So
yeah, and if all of them dislike it, they shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
And if
it's a problem if one of them likes it and the others don't.
Yeah, and if there's one person that's doing it and everybody else doesn't like it, talk to them, and if they're not willing to stop, then you may have to kick them out.
Yes, I'm a big proponent of don't solve out-of-game problems with in-game solutions. Don't punish a character because a player is a problem player. Talk to that problem player, be an adult about it. Have the difficult conversation of like, hey, can you please stop doing this thing? I've noticed it's a trend, blah, blah, blah. The other players don't like it, yada, yada. Have that conversation, be an adult. So many of the things on the Reddit threads, the Dungeons and Dragons Reddit threads have been like, how do you handle this? So many things can be answered with talk to the player. Talk to them. Talk to them. Be an adult. Talk to them. Talk to them. If they're not willing to talk, or you've tried talking to them and it's not, kick them out of the game. It's a game. You shouldn't be playing the game with people that you don't like to play the game with. So if all of your players don't like infighting and in-stealing and things, it wouldn't be happening in the first place because none of them like it. If some of them do and some of them don't, how I generally rule it is anything that can be considered PvP, anything that's fighting or attacking or stealing or whatever, it's I turn to like somebody says, I'm going to steal that lantern from this other guy, and I turn to that other guy and I say, are you okay with him trying this? And if they say no, then I turn to the first guy and I say, it's not going to succeed, so you can either retract your attempt or you can make the attempt and it will auto fail.
Yeah, that works.
And they can be like, yeah. And if the other person's fine with it, they say, oh yeah, absolutely. And then I go, right, let it happen. And it depends on the party and how that dynamic happens. It can sometimes, with the Viva guys, it's happened a few times where one of them has tried to punch the other one in the face, and I turn to them and say, "Are you okay with this happening?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "Do you want to still go?" And he goes, "Yes." So he just swing and a miss, and he's like a drunken fighter, and he just can't hit him. And then at one point, the guy who's trying to be targeted says, "I'm going to punch him in the face." And I said, "Are you okay with this?" And he said, "Yes." So while person B was attacking person A and missing all of the time, just auto missing, because person A said he wasn't okay with it. Person A then tried to attack person B and succeeded in punching him in the face. And it was very funny because it is a comedy group at the forefront of our Viva stuff. It's comedy first and foremost. So it was fine. In a home game, I probably would have been like, "Hey, you can't ask to do this if you're not okay with him doing it back." So I probably would have handled it differently, but it was comedy, and we knew it was for the lols.
Love it.
If you can't hit an enemy and run away, world-ending outcomes. Any other questions? How do you deal with a TPK? Have you ever had to deal with a TPK? Total party kill?
Yeah, let me think back.
While you're thinking, the only time I've had a TPK is in a one-shot I was running, where it was like a heist one-shot. They were approached in a bar by some dude who said, "I need you to steal something from the top of that wizard's tower." And the heist was basically they had to work through the 7 levels of this wizard's tower, and each level was dedicated to another school of magic. So the basement was to do with necromancy, and they had to fight an undead, and then the next one was abjuration, protection magic, and they had to disarm the alarm and blah blah blah. And they worked their way up through the thing, and while they were going, they were stealing items. They stole a necklace of fireballs, which they weren't able to identify because none of them in the party was arcane enough. So they just knew it was an orange beaded necklace that did something in the school of evocation, because that's the level they were on when they stole it. Evocation. And I was like, so you know that it's going to do something. It's going to conjure some sort of effect when you use them. And they're like, all right. They went all the way up to the top. And then once they got to the top of the level, the same quest giver arrived to them and dropped the illusion, and he was the wizard that owned the tower, and said, "Thank you for testing my security devices. Now I know where my weaknesses lie in blah blah blah. Now give me back all of the stuff that you've stolen from my house." And one of them went, "No, this was part of the payment for why we were doing this in the first place." And he's like, "No, you're not going to leave here with my stuff, so give me it back." And so he threw down the necklace of fireballs at his feet, not knowing what it would do. And he threw it down and cast like a 9th level fireball and just exploded the entire party and just killed them all. And so thankfully it was the end of the campaign, at the end of the one shot, so it was fine. And I didn't really have to deal with it because it was a one shot. But that's the only time I've had a TPK in my games. And because I set it, even one shots are set in my home world, it just allowed me to flesh out the story of my world. So if anyone else in any of the other campaigns happens to go to that city, people will be talking about how, oh, there's a destroyed wizard tower over there, and one day during a stormy night, the top of the tower exploded, and nobody really knows why. It's just part of the history of the world now.
Yeah, for me, I can think back of one specific TPK that was in that first campaign, the one I was very short. I didn't enjoy it as much, and what happened there is, I think it was a player using some kind of fire spell when they shouldn't have been using a fire spell at that time. And they were traveling through the desert, and I forget the details, but I just remember it set off a huge explosion, which crystallized all the sand into glass. Ooh, nice. And turned them all into dead glass statues. Except Arena's player, who luckily missed that session, and their character wasn't part of it. But... yeah, and then it ended the campaign.
Yeah, just like you don't carry on the campaign with like, oh, maybe you were resurrected by this thing, you know.
Yeah, it depends. So we have a discussion with the party about it, which is even with individual deaths. Sometimes we say, you know, well, what are you wanting to make a new character, or do you just want me to choose for you, you know, as the DM? And we do talk about it the same with TPKs, and if there is, for example, you know, TPK happens and everybody's like, no, but we really want to continue the story, it's so good right now. Then I will find a way to work it in, whether it be divine intervention, or maybe the bad guy resurrected them as undead for his own army, and now they
that's always a good one. Yeah, that's
something
always a good
like
one, because when they've gone down to 0, they don't necessarily know how the rest of that fight plays out. So it could be that the bad guy stabilized them and then bound them and took him back to his place and woke him up in a dungeon and was like, now you work for me.
Exactly, but I realized I haven't had many TPKs because my players, they know how merciless I am. They're really careful.
So you have no plot armor. You have no, like, you're the main character of this campaign.
No.
I tend to in my games. I tend to have a little plot armor because my story of my game is so heavily reliant on the player's backstory. I can't really come up with a story idea until I've got the characters. Once I've got the characters and the backstories, I can look at things of their backstory and go, oh, these things tie together really nicely. That'll come out. They'll finally realize that they have this in common in their backstory. Oh, this happens. Oh, which means that this guy should be the big bad evil guy because he's from his backstory and stuff. And so if I get like 4 levels into that 20 level arc in my mind and that guy dies, I'm like, oh, now the big bad evil guy has no relevance to the party at all. And so for that reason, I tend to have a little plot armor. I'm still in the situation where if you are ignoring my warnings, all of the NPCs telling you, oh, that's a very dangerous place, and you go in there not level appropriate, then you've made that decision and I'll kill you. But if it's just like a fight that I haven't quite balanced right, then there tends to be a little bit of plot armor on it.
No, I'm merciless. No, I don't do any plot armor, and whatever. Like, I'm a DM of consequence, so whatever happens. And if it's really a TPK and it's a clean TPK, that's not like, okay, this is just kind of bullshit, then that's what it is. End of the story. Yep,
that's where the story ends. The the most notable example is that in the Viva la Dirty campaign, one of the characters during a lunch break in filming, he asked me about plot armor, and I explained what I just said, and he said, "Oh, could we remove plot armor? I'd like to know that everything that we do is super dangerous, blah blah blah." And I was like, "Sure, your character has no plot armor now. The dice will decide whether or not you live or die, and I won't intervene." And he goes, "Okay." The very next thing that he did when we came back from dinner is threw himself off of an airship.
Oh my god! I had a player that did the same thing. It was test my plot armor.
We came, and I don't think he was doing it to test plot armor. He was on an airship, and then I pointed out, just as kind of like flavor, just as verisimilitude for the world, just making it feel more real and fleshed out. I said, oh, one of the crew members is an Aarakocra, and his job is as watcher and catcher. He's kind of navigator, but kind of just there to like fly overboard and catch people who fall in the middle of like a pirate fight. And he goes, can I test that concept? And I was like, if you want. And he goes, whoop, and threw himself off of a ship without a second thought. And I went, okay, I guess I'll see. And I started rolling dice to see if the Aarakocra could catch him in time. And if he'd have failed that final roll, I'd have had his character just splat on the ground because he specifically just told me about how he doesn't want plot armor on his character.
Yeah, wow. No, Gorthon did the same thing in Fool's Gold, threw himself into like a nearly bottomless pit and killed himself.
Whoa.
It's like, all right. Sure, no plot armor here. Like, I don't know what you want me to prove. You did.
You did, bro.
It worked out, but still.
They resurrected him or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think he just fell unconscious and he actually saved or something like that. But he was gonna die. And like, I'm not gonna save you from your stupidity. I asked him 3 times, like, are you sure?
Are you
and you know, when your DM is doing that, saying, are you really sure? You should be double thinking what you're about to do.
When the Aarakocra caught him on that very last roll, right before he splattered on the ground and brought him back to the ship, the very next thing he did was an NPC cloud giantess intercepted the ship and gave them some prophecy of like, oh, you're the chosen one to this other player, the warlock in the campaign. You're the chosen one for these reasons. You have some sort of warlock blood. And the guy who threw himself off the ship said, warlock blood? What happens if I drink that blood then? Do I become a warlock? And I went, you can try if you want. And like they enacted, they sort of like role played at the table, him cutting his finger and holding it out for this other numpty to drink. And right before he did, I was like, are you sure you want to go down this route? And he went, oh, if I become a warlock, I have to deal with spell slots. And he's playing a barbarian. He could not care less about the game, it seems. And he's like, oh, I don't want to. I can hit things with an axe. I don't want to deal with that. And he decided in the last moment, through his laziness, he decided he didn't want to deal with the issues of dealing with spell slots and warlock stuff, so he didn't do it. But I was like, you just told me about not having plot armor on your character, and then you threw yourself off a ship and tried to deliberately give yourself infected warlock blood.
If I was that person that's catching people falling from the airship, I would have beaten that guy to death after saving him.
I did say that he just like screeches in his face, and then one of the other characters like comes over and gives him a few gold pieces as a thank you, and like pops up.
Yeah,
flies back up to his perch.
Yeah, talking about lack of plot armor, I even stepped it up for the second campaign, that Second Sun campaign, because I told them, like, I think it was after the first maybe 5 sessions or so, they were introduced to the concept of priests freaking out and all being in a stir, and they were eventually went to investigate, and there was a shocking report that resurrections no longer worked at all for anybody. So it's like, this is do or die now.
You did.
And
if it happens,
eventually they solved that problem and they re-enabled resurrections. But for like the largest section of the campaign, they were disabled. Like that, you could not resurrect.
So aside from one of the things that gets leveled at D&D as a criticism, especially 5th edition, is that it's quite difficult to die. You get knocked down to 0 hit points, which can take quite a while if you're anything past 5th level. You get knocked down to 0 hit points, and then you make death saving throws, and only if you fail 3 of them do you die, and then you can get resurrected immediately just for the cost of 300 gold if somebody has Revivify. Like, aside from removing resurrection entirely, is there things that you have done or homebrewed rules about to try and make death feel like it's a more permanent or more dangerous thing, like it's easier to die or anything like that? It's more dangerous to go down and fight?
In 3.5, it's already pretty direct, because you don't have the death saves. Instead, in 3.5, you have your con score as your negative HP. So if you got 14 Constitution, that means you can go down to -14 and then dead, perma-dead. You're done.
Okay, that's cool.
So that's already pretty like nail biting. You know, when you're on the ground and like a goblin
if you
is
have
stabbing
seven,
you,
if you have 7
your
hit
HP,
points and you're like, oh, it's only going to take 20 hit points to kill me.
Yeah, because you bleed out 1 point per round unless someone attacks you to deal you even more damage. And you have to roll every round to try to stabilize, to stop your bleeding, and then you have to roll again to wake up from being unconscious.
Okay, so yeah, 3.5 does sound like it's, you know, not the issues that are leveled at 5e for that reason.
Exactly, and in 3.5, you can very much get one shot. You know, if you have 10 Constitution and 20 health, if someone deals you 31 damage, you're dead. End of story.
Yeah. Yeah, whereas in 5th edition, you have to get to your negative hit point maximum. So if you've got 70 hit points because you're a level 10 or whatever, and you get taken down, even if you're on 1 hit point when you get hit, you need to get 71 hit points in order for it to insta-kill you.
Yeah, lame.
and it's even lamer because, like, in the rules as written, falling damage, it caps at 20d6, which is about 70 damage. So anybody with more than 70 hit points isn't even going to get knocked unconscious from falling off of an airship.
Yeah, exactly.
And a barbarian at level 3 can go into a rage, half the damage that he gets from falling, and stand up and walk away at level 3, which is why I homebrewed falling damage to be like, there's not particularly a cap. Well, there is a cap for like terminal velocity, but it's way higher than 70 hit points. It's like hundreds.
Yeah, definitely. I remember, like, some of my friends, we refer to 5e as like baby D&D because of that fact, because it's so hard to die.
5e is very much the simplified version, the thing that tried to get more people into D&D and absolutely worked. More people are playing D&D now than ever before, and it is fantastic. It's wonderful, but I do find that it's oversimplified in certain areas. That I'm like, that didn't need to be this simple. It didn't.
But that's why you have the nice buffet of D&D versions.
Yeah,
you like this.
You can get into 5th edition, and then you can try out others. So yeah, maybe once I finally try my hand at 3.5, I'll go, oh wow, this one.
Yeah, maybe I'll DM it for you.
You've heard it here first, guys. It's an oral contract. It's binding. I'm going to clip it. I'm going to clip it.
We got the Tarask duel and the
3.5 one shot.
It was a really good question I saw earlier. Actually, I want to ask you that. What is your personal policy or opinion on retconning?
Retconning, well, thankfully, in my home games, I can retcon without issue, because unless everybody's taking copious notes, they don't remember. If I don't remember, they won't remember. And I can retcon something that I've said in a previous game and it'll go unnoticed. If it's a game online where people can go back and watch videos and VODs and things, and it's harder to retcon without somebody pulling you up on it. But also, if it's necessary, I'll do it. Like if I try not to do it as much as I can, leaning much more towards what we were talking about before, where I like, oh shit, I've made a plot hole. Let's make it into a feature rather than a bug. Like, that's what I'll do in preference to retconning per se. But I will, if I need to go, I've decided that these two towns being a day apart makes no sense. The travel distance between them is now a week. That's fine. I'll just do that. And my players understand I'm not an infallible, omniscient god that had this entire thing planned out from the start. Like, I'm making it up as I go. I'm doing my best to improv it, and people are understanding. So yeah, I'll retcon if I have to, but I try to avoid it if possible. Yeah,
it's a similar rule for me as well. It's I rarely, very, very rarely retcon. It's only when I make severe logic mistakes. Like you said, these towns are not that close. They're actually way further apart or closer. Then I will come in with a retcon. But otherwise, it's like a last resort. So I look at it, is there any way I can do the whole trick of, isn't that interesting, and then roll with that? I will.
Yeah.
Even if I may not like it as much, but if it's just a severe logic error, then I'll go and say, no, sorry, that was a mistake, my bad.
Yeah, actually, guys, from now on, and the things that, I suppose it doesn't really count as a retcon, but the things that I will change and just outright say, we're doing it like this from now on, is more rules. Like, if I've decided that I'm just not happy with the way that a rule works, I'll be like, we're no longer using the flanking rule or whatever, and that's kind of a retcon, because we've used certain rules and ways of playing the game up until this point, and then we change from this point onwards. So in a way, it's retconning in that sense, but it's not really to do with the lore of the game. It's to do with how we're playing it, and so I've got even less qualms about doing that, because I'm like, no, it's just the mechanics of the game that I've decided that we're changing.
Yeah, for sure.
This has been wonderful. I'm aware that we're over 2 hours now, so I don't want to keep you all day.
I'm in no rush. If there's any last questions we want to answer,
other questions, people. There are stories of people surviving falls from 10,000 meters. Yeah, and you can do so. Like, that person would potentially make their save and take half damage, and then that would knock them out. But then they'd make their saving throws, and so they'd stabilize, and so they can survive it. But I'm just saying that it's way too easy to survive a fall.
Also because the damage is capped.
Like, because the damage is capped at a certain amount. It's ridiculous. So a few things that I do to make death a little bit more dangerous is that if you fail any death saving throws, there's a chance of lingering injuries. Maybe you've got broken ribs, which are going to have an effect. Maybe you've got internal abrasions, or maybe you've got broken toes, or whatever. Maybe you're missing an eye. Like, those things can happen as like an effect of failing death saves in my world. And then also resurrection, you can do it, but it requires a ritual rather than just automatically working. It's the same with remove curse. I find remove curse to be one of the worst spells for making a game enjoyable, because curses are so fun to play as. I'm talking to the person who would know more than anybody. Curses are super fun. You give your players curses and make a whole arc about them trying to get rid of that. That's a very fun thing to do, especially when they've just taken down a hag house and they're trying to clean out the hag's house of all these like disgusting cursed items, and then they touch them and whoop, now you've got a curse. It's a really fun thing. If one of the party members can just be like, oh, remove curse, and it just works. Nah. So I have remove curses like you have to like undergo a ritual. If it's a powerful enough curse, you have to get a specific item in order to undergo the ritual, so it sends you on a quest and things like that. And similar for a resurrection, like I basically took it straight from Matt Mercer that if you want to resurrect, you've got like a ritual of 3 chances to encourage that person's soul to come back to their body through any means that you want. Set a DC for each one. If you succeed or fail, that increases or decreases the DC of the check, and then at the end of it, you roll and see if they come back or not. And if they don't, that's it, done. Your soul is gone. Yep. There's no bringing you back.
I've made a similar rule for my games. It's called the Soul Shatter rule, where the first resurrection is 100% chance to succeed, but any subsequent resurrections get more and more difficult. If you fail a certain percentile roll, the soul shatters and is gone forever.
Oh wow.
So that's kind of a way to curb chain resurrections.
How do you manage afterlife then in your games? If somebody dies and doesn't want to be resurrected, but their soul hasn't shattered, like where does their soul go?
Soul has to be willing. I took that 3.5. All the resurrection spells say the soul has to be willing.
Yes, it's the same in 5th edition. But I mean, like, if the person doesn't want to come back, and like, where does their soul go? Where do you rule that the afterlife is? Like,
was it the astral plane? To be honest, I haven't fully explored it because the Bellowing Wilds had the soul crystals from the mech dragon,
and everything gets sucked into that
all
instead.
The souls.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my way to explore a different version of it.
Yeah.
But I haven't fully explored the bigger afterlife.
Like, if they don't die within radius of a soul crystal, their soul goes somewhere else.
Well, I know they have to go across the river Styx, which there is a god in my book that is responsible for ferrying those souls across it. And then, depending on your actions in life, you might be fed to her pet, or she might bring you to a nicer place. So
nice, that's cool.
Yeah,
I've got a god of transition from life to death as well. And my afterlife is sort of like a waiting room where as soon as you arrive in this like serene forest, one of this god's minions comes along and has a big book, and they like take your notes and like, oh yeah, you were due to arrive about now, and then you just have to kind of wait in this waiting room to decide, am I going to the good place or the not good place?
Nice.
And if you're resurrected in that time before you can get sorted, that's kind of where my idea of like the magic of it has to be within the first 10 days or it has to be within the blah blah blah. It's because like if you can get them before they leave the forest, if you can get them before the person comes along with the book and jots down that they're dead, then that's why it only takes a 3rd level revivify. But if they've if within the minute the person has come back and now they're in a book, revivify doesn't work anymore because their soul has moved into the waiting room area. And if you can get them in the waiting room, then they stay there for about 10 days, and so that's why Raise Dead works. And then if by that point they've moved on to a different plane of existence because they've been sorted into their respective places, and then that's why you require more and more powerful magics as it goes.
Yeah. Nice.
Detective Tiger says, how do you deal with players that don't take notes?
That's on them.
Yeah, that's on them. If they don't want to remember things, that's on them.
So it depends. It's for the most part, that's on them. But if it's kind of really important, then sometimes I'll be generous and I'll say, well, roll an intelligence check.
Yes.
See if you remember, or wisdom. Yeah. I'll let them choose. And then if they remember, okay, then I'll reveal information. But otherwise, it's just kind of on them. That's if they don't remember, like, the important person's name, they might be insulted as a result. That's kind of funny.
That's birds of a feather, you and I. More and more, it's coming up. It's the exact same thing. Like if it's a piece of lore that I think that their character would remember, but the player doesn't necessarily because we haven't played for 3 weeks. But in game, it's still like an hour since it happened. I'll be like, intelligence check, see if you remember it. And based on how high they roll, it's like a sliding scale. Most of my checks and saves and things are not like I don't really set a DC all that often to be like, and this amount wins but one less loses. All of my things tend to be more sliding scale of like, all right, your intelligence check was a 12. That's not that great, but it's above average, so you get a not great but above average amount of information from me. I do love when my players take notes. In one of my home games, somebody takes extensive notes, and it's fantastic for me because it means that I don't have to remember after the game.
Big shout out to Irina. Thank you for always keeping extensive notes on the games. It's so much appreciated.
It is so helpful. It's so helpful to have a shared document that in my preparation for the next session, especially as like a full-time dungeon master, and I dungeon master like 10 games at once with all the different things. It's so good to start a new game and go like, where were we when I left off? Where did we leave off? I can just open up her notes and go, oh yeah, that's right. They met so-and-so. They were on the middle of this quest. I was sending them this way. That's what I was setting up to reveal in this session. Okay, yeah, go from there. It's very useful, but it's not required of any of my players. They can take as many or as little notes as they want.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Let me see if there's any others. How do you balance play where you have a group of min-max optimizers looking for that last 1d4 of damage and role players that couldn't care less? So you've got a mix.
Them both in the same game?
If you've got a mix of min-maxers and role players. You ever had that issue?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That is a tough one. Because if you've got the entire party doing one or the other, you don't have a problem. Because, like for example, if the entire party min-maxes, guess what? The monsters are going to min-max. Yeah. So it solves itself really easily.
I have got no problem. So much it comes up as like, oh, my guy's really powerful and he's really hard. Good. You can throw more things at them. I deliberately give my players max. I deliberately give all of my characters max HP at first and second level, so that they're not quite as squishy, and so I can deliberately throw harder monsters at them. So it's not a problem if everybody's like that, but I can see why it's a problem if they've got a mix.
Yeah, if you've got like one person or two people in there or something, I will generally do like, you have to think outside of the game and think more like about the technical side of things. So you realize you have one or two people that enjoy fighting, stats, calculations, and you have the rest of the people that are like, no math, we want to do role play. So what you can do for those cases is, for example, make some encounters that specifically challenge those players. It may feel like you're picking on them, but actually you're giving them exactly what they want because they want that fight. They want to feel powerful. And for example, if one of them, I don't know, is like a warlock, well, then the monster, maybe it fucks with Eldritch Blasts or something like that. Or, it's like a flying type, I don't know. Try to counter that min-maxer a little bit, and that gives them the challenge they seek, while not pissing off your role players.
I don't have this as an issue, thankfully, because my players tend to find groups that they enjoy, and only once or twice have I had a group that didn't have good dynamics among the players of how they wanted to play the game, and so that kind of dissolved. But most of the time, the players will gravitate towards playing the game with other players that they want to play with, and so they'll play in a similar style. But I would say with my with my naive expectations of how this would play out, I would imagine that just the way that I play a fight anyway is not random encounter. I don't tend to use random encounters. If they're fighting something, it's because I want them to fight that thing for a reason. It's got some sort of story to it. It's progressing some kind of story, and so because my fights can still be optimized for a min-maxer, but it will also have some story to it. Like there's a reason for the bad guy to be fighting them. The role players will be enjoying the fight because of the role play elements of like describing how they're fighting this thing and trying to work out what's going on. And the role players will be like, oh, maybe if we do this thing over here and pull that lever, then this will happen. And oh, I'm going to use this, and they'll role play between themselves. Hey, if you go over there and do this thing, then blah blah blah, and they'll shout each other. They'll be role playing their actions in the combat while the min maxers are tanking up the front or something. I imagine it would still work out fine because you can just include both optimization and role play in your encounters, in your fight, and have something for everybody in a way.
Yep.
Hopefully. Absolutely. But yeah, it's a thing that you just have to practice with. You have to get good at it. You just have to play D&D until you work these things out. Especially if you're playing with the same party over and over again, you're going to learn how they like to play. Yeah.
Also, if you want just a bit of a band-aid fix, like really the min-maxer versus roleplay you should have solved when you were talking about player expectations. But if you need a bit of a band-aid fix, just give the role players some crazy magic items to like protect them a little bit more. Like that's not ideal, but you know what? It works in a pinch.
Yeah, it's fine as long as you don't have the problem player of the min-maxer is also a jealous player of being like, I want something that makes me more powerful. Why do they get it, kind of thing.
Oh, you can. You just play to more power fantasies. So while you give the role player, for example, an armor that makes them really resistant, well, unfortunately, it only fits them because it was specifically made for halflings, for example. However, you might give the min-maxer something that makes them temporarily double the size.
Yeah.
It's still powerful, but technically the AC is actually a much better bonus. But you get the power feeling. You get the
feeling of the power. That's what it is, isn't it? It's about the feeling. You work out why that person is min-maxing. Is it because they want to feel like an absolute unit tank, unmovable behemoth of a person? Then you give them something that gives them advantage on being knocked prone. You give them something that gives them you give them boots that's like you cannot be pushed against your will because they want to feel like a tank that's like bam, I can absolutely take on a charging rhino and not move. Whatever it is, why is that person min-maxing? Because they want to feel like the most the most intelligent wizard at the back that knows all of the spells and units for every particular available thing. You give them a spell book that is magical because it allows you to prepare all of your spells instead of just the ones that you can prepare in a day, which I know is one of your home rules anyway.
That's my main homebrew rules. There's no spell books, there's no preparations, you know them all.
Which is absurd. I was like, what? That is so powerful. And made playing a druid really interesting because I was like, I have got so many spells that I can do at any one point. I can go through the entire druid list and go, what's useful in this moment? It was a new way of thinking for me when you said that about the home rule, because I enjoy the challenge of being like, somebody goes, fuck, we need to breathe underwater. I don't have it today. What's the challenge there? What's the challenge? I've not prepared breathe underwater.
Nothing fun to it.
I don't know. I find it fun. I find people going, all right, we need to now creatively come up with another way to get through this river, or we need to decide we're going to need to rest. We can't afford that guy to take another 8 hours of running away from us because we're giving chase. So we can't afford to rest so that I can prepare the spell. But we're going to have to come up with another creative way of getting across it, whatever. But like, yeah.
And for 3.5, I actually made my own spell app for my players because they have access to the entire spell book. I don't know if you can see that on camera.
Oh, wow.
It's,
You're on app for it.
Can you? I do programming.
Right.
It's hard to see, but that number says 4,700 spells.
Jesus Christ. Is that how many spells there are in 3.5?
With all the expansions and all the additions, it's 4,700 spells after duplicates are removed. And
I imagine that in reality, then in practice, it essentially works out that they do have the same spells prepared because nobody would know that many spells, and so and they're not going to scroll. They're not when it comes to their turn. They're not going to go, just give me a moment here and scroll through 4,700 spells to decide on the right one. They're going to know the ones that they use and the ones that are useful, and they're going to use them. Yeah. So it will be self-balancing.
You can make your own like spell books and save the ones you think is important, but you can also just search by level in class. But 4,700 spells that are always at the ready whenever you want to cast them. It's kind of a way to counter my crazy DMing because they can now cast crazy spells at me
that you weren't prepared for and stuff. Yeah.
I love how chat is freaking out about it.
Do you feel? Yeah, I know. It's a huge thing. Yeah. Do you feel that marshals get underpowered depending on casters regarding casters then, because that would make casters even more powerful, and a lot of the argument is that marshals already get underpowered at later levels.
I mean, marshals are underpowered. I find a little bit in general when compared to casters. I did apply the same rule where you're not really limited to like preparing stances and stuff like that. You can just kind of
because in 3.5 there's like fighting stances and things, isn't there?
Exactly, and you're kind of limited to how many you know and how many you can choose. Okay. So I did kind of open those up, but yeah, no, casters just are a little bit more versatile that way. That's just how the way it is. But they're not going to be tanking. That's what you got your martial classes for, right? So, I mean, it worked out. Nobody was complaining about it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if it works for your party, that's the ultimate test of if anything you do, any homebrew rule or house rule or anything. If it works for you, it works for you. Don't let anybody tell you you're playing D&D wrong.
No, God knows, no way to play it wrong unless people aren't having fun.
Yeah. If people aren't having fun, that's the only way that you're losing, and that's why I always have in my session zeros, I always send out a form of like, is there anything we shouldn't touch on here? Because in my home games, nothing is off limits. All of my players have told me essentially, you can have, you know, this
you
kind
can have
of
the big
kind
note
of assault.
Topics in there.
You can have the big note topics, and I've talked about this on a podcast before. Content warning coming up. I'll be talking about child torture and things. In one of my
I feel like I can contribute.
In one of my home games, the primary first bad guys that they were fighting was a hag coven. They went and killed a green hag, and then they thought it was dealt with, and then the quest giver, the archfey, came to them and said, sorry, she was only one of 3, you need to kill the rest of the coven. And because they'd like gone off and done something else in the meantime before realizing she was a part of a coven, the coven had been recruiting other hags now. The hags, the power dynamic, there was a power vacuum, and all the other hags in the area went, oh, have you heard the Susatosen coven is recruiting now? And they started doing horrific crimes and things in the area to try and audition to be a part of this coven. And so there was demon books in one city that was being released by one hag, and there was like another thing in this. Eventually they got a third guy, so that by the time they got back to them, they were a complete coven again. And one of them is an Anis hag, and in the lore in 5th edition is that the Anis hags are all about children. They hide themselves off as like grannies, and they give the kid like a little token, and through that token the Anis hag can always communicate with that child regardless of where they are, and they can corrupt them over time to doing horrific deeds and things like that. So while they're trying to work out where this Anis hag lives, they come across an old abandoned wood elf village that's completely burned to the ground, and there's one guy living there who's like absolute fucking whack job, and he's going, Granny told me to do it, Granny will save me, Granny is, and he's like he's now an adult, but like years ago when he was a child, he burned he burned everything in the village to the ground. And they eventually got to the hag house of the person they'd originally killed, and they started exploring it more, knowing that it's coven now, and they discovered there were 3 bedrooms, one for each of the hags, and the one that belonged to the Anis hag had as carpet it was the scalps of children, and as wallpaper it was the flayed skins of children.
Oh,
and when they finally fought this Anis hag in person, she was wearing as like boots, as like leg greaves, shin guards. She was wearing the corpses of a child that had like basically the spine had been ripped out, and it was and her leg was where the spine would be on this child, and these 2 dead children were kind of like flopping around on her legs, and like I wouldn't do that on something I'm putting on YouTube or something without a serious content warning, but it did mean that my players in the moment, who had already told me ahead of time that they were okay with that sort of thing, that's a definitive. Like sometimes it's fun to throw a monster at a party that's like, oh, should we be killing this person? Is it ethical? Are they doing what's right? Do they think that they're in the right and we need to be talking to them rather than killing them? But sometimes it's fun to throw a monster like that where you're like, no, this person's evil. This person is inherently an evil hag, and I need to kill her. Like she shouldn't be in the world anymore. And like, and that's one way to do it. It really made a very memorable monster, where there was no,
because there's no doubt. Like
there's no doubt.
This is a piece of shit. You have to kill this. This is negotiate while she's wearing her child cloak.
Exactly. She's not like a morally ambiguous person. It is the epitome of evil. She has come from an evil place, and she is created by evil, and it made sense that way. So yes, I know that's. Yeah. So yeah, I know that sort of thing I wouldn't put in like
a podcast or like something I'm putting out on the, but I feel like that's stuff that I can do in my home games. And as long as I've talked to the people in my session zeros about like where their triggers are and what can and can't be talked about, then you're fine to do whatever is within that boundary.
Yeah, it's the same in a home game. There's nothing's off the table, and yeah, we go all out. I mean, God, they've already killed a child in the story. So she was pretty evil. I guess it's
she was pretty evil. She was evil.
She was rotten to the core for sure. But I mean, I've had such a good encounter. Okay, this is minor gore trigger warning. Minor, it's not that bad. But I had a really fun puzzle boss fight where one of the players' beloved NPCs, they were actually having like an in-game relationship with that NPC, was captured by her abusive father for surgery. And when they found out about it, so they rushed in, they tried to find him. They found her semi-conscious on the table with like her organs beside her. And the thing is, they couldn't move her for that reason. And then Boss Man came in and they started a fight. But the entire time they had to try to avoid
dynamics
her in the fight because they couldn't move her. And if she got hit in any way, she was going to die.
She's going to die.
So
it's a dynamic. It allows for the fight to not be stagnant. Like I run over here, and then once I'm next to my bad guy, we stay there until somebody dies.
Yeah, like, they were like, we lure him out of the room, and we close the door, and then it's like, I'm gonna stay behind and take care of her, and you guys go fight. And it's like, oh, it's so good.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. I love.
Happy ending, by the way. They won and they saved her, and she's all better now.
Nice.
And lived happily ever after. But it was a good fight.
Lived happily ever after in a world of D&D monsters. She lived another 2 years until something else came along and did the same thing.
Something bigger ate
her. All right. This has been an absolute delight. I will let you get off, and I need to prepare for the Fool's Gold game as well. That's coming up on my channel later on. So one more time, we'll talk about the Kickstarter. Here you can find it foolsgold5e.com. Takes you to the Kickstarter page. You should pledge. You should absolutely check it out. It's going to be packed full of all kinds of things. And if they get to, where are we at now? Let me refresh the page and see where we're at.
Get to 1 million.
We're at 940,000. Only 60,000 away from 1 million. If we get if we get them to 1 million, there's extra content going to be coming about extra parts of the world and things, even more stuff. You should definitely check it out. It comes with all kinds of you can pledge at different levels for all kinds of different things, like the STL files for the minis, or you can have them just printed and sent to you. What else is there? There's the.
I mean, if you don't care about Fool's Gold, go get yourself a 12-inch tall Tarrasque mini.
Yeah, you can just get the Tarrasque mini, which is
its own tier. Amazing. It comes with nothing else. You just get the Tarrasque.
So lots and lots for you to check out. Go and check out that Kickstarter. And if you haven't already and you don't know why you should care about Fool's Gold, definitely go and check out Dingo Doodles. The whole sort of campaign, the whole sort of why it became famous in the first place was because of Dingo's amazing artwork and commentary about like anecdotes that had happened in the campaign. It starts with how I released the Tarrasque using karaoke or something, and it's a wonderful story. Even just as a standalone, it's a wonderful story. So check it out. Definitely go and check it out, and then check out the Fool's Gold Into the Bellowing Wilds. Is there anywhere else that people should check you out, Felix?
You can chat with me on Twitter if you want, at Felix Irnich, or I also sometimes do some chill gaming streams here on Twitch, twitch.tv/FinalBossFelix. Feel free to follow me if you want.
Final Boss Felix. You got this, is that something maybe we can... Oh, there it is. Final Boss Felix. Nightbot's shouting you out.
Hey.
Cool. And if you have come to this channel because of Felix and you don't know who I am... I'm Robert Hartley. I'm Robert Hartley GM. I'm a full-time dungeon master. I'm most well known for my work with Viva La Dirt League, a comedy group in New Zealand with a YouTube channel. We decided to start playing D&D together a while ago, and the people who loved it really loved it, and so we branched off and did a secondary channel that's specifically just to D&D content, and we're now up to episode 68 comes out tonight of that particular campaign. I also do Dungeons and Dragons related content here on Twitch about 5 days a week, where I do short rests like this. I do an interactive game on a Saturday where people can you guys in the chat can actually decide on the direction of a character's decisions. I do behind the scenes where I talk about the Viva la Dirt League campaign and tell you about DM tips and things like that, and various other things. I do a Robert Reads where I read some of the monster manuals and the Xanathar's Guide and everything like that as well.
Oh, I love
Lots of
that.
things. So drop me a follow. I'm almost at 10,000 followers.
Yo, go follow.
Yeah, see if you can get me up to 10,000 follows. And then in when is it? Time
Roughly
zones.
an hour and a half,
Hour
right?
and a half,
Hour
I
20
think,
minutes?
something like that. I think it's about an hour and 20 minutes away. I'll be playing in Fool's Gold one shot here on my channel. It'll be the first time that somebody who isn't me has dungeon mastered on my channel, which is very interesting. It's my good friend Dead Aussie Gamer, and I'll be joined by a wonderful array of guests, including two of the people from the Dingo Doodles, the Into the Bellowing Wilds campaign.
Yeah. Oh,
I think that about sums it up. I'll stick us over to the ending soon. Stick around for the raid, everybody. I'll find someone cool to raid. And don't forget to do all of the things. Bye!
Bye!